Scott Griffin. I'm IPI's Deputy Director, and I have the pleasure of emceeing some of the sessions this morning. Before we begin with this session, I just want to share with you a couple of updates about the program, as we had some difficulties with one of the flights landing yesterday, so we had to move around some of the sessions. Everything's correct on SCED, but on the printed program there are some changes. So just to let you know that at 11 this morning, originally was scheduled a session on feminist media. That will take place tomorrow, and instead at 11 we have the session on audience-first journalism, innovative strategies to build trust in your brand, which was originally scheduled for tomorrow morning. So that's been a switch. And the other switch is at 12, where we originally had the panel on mental health. That will take place tomorrow at 9:30. And in that place, we have the session on cybercrime laws and press freedom. So everything's correct on the online schedule on SCED, but on the printed program, there's been a change, so better to follow the online version. Again, we had a situation beyond our control with one of the planes that couldn't land due to weather, but everyone's coming just a little bit later. So if you have any questions about the schedule, obviously feel free to ask us. But let's go ahead and get started. We have this really incredible and important panel about courage and resilience. We have 4 journalists and media founders who are working all in very difficult but very different situations. We're going to talk about the challenges that they face, but also how they overcome them in these very different situations. From Ukraine, from Myanmar, from Sudan, and from Hong Kong. And we're very lucky to have Laura Sarikowski, former editor-in-chief at Helsing and Sanomat and a member of the IPI Executive Board, who will be stepping in, who will be moderating this panel. This morning, Carlos Dada was originally moderating, but his flight was also delayed. But we're very happy to have Laura here taking over this conversation, so it's in very good hands. Laura, thank you so much for moderating, and I'll pass it over to you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for coming here today to hear about this extremely important topic. We are talking about navigating crisis, and as all the world's eyes are on Gaza, unfortunately, it does not mean that the crisis elsewhere would have been settled. Today we have 4 very distinguished journalists and a publisher, and I will start by actually asking you to introduce yourselves and briefly the conflict that you are covering. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to first have a discussion within ourselves, and then open up to the questions at the end. So if you have anything to ask, please don't hesitate to raise your hand at the end. So let's start with you, Tom. Please introduce yourself and the conflict that you're covering.
I'm Tom Grundy from Hong Kong Free Press. Thank you for having me. I should preface by saying I work in a pretty wealthy financial center. We don't face the physical risks that some of my colleagues to the left here, face. But nevertheless, as was said in the introduction yesterday, there's a lot of backpedaling in terms of civil society, journalism, democracy around the world, and Hong Kong's proof that it can happen in wealthier, developed places as well. To compress 30 years into 3 minutes. The city saw a 30-year democracy movement. I've had to make notes on all of this since, I'd say, the 1989 Tiananmen crackdown. And I showed up 19 years ago and bore witness to what I would say is the most vibrant civil society you could ever imagine. It was very much a city of protests, just an absolute carnival of dissent. Day to day, spurred by fears over Chinese encroachment. Through the 1997 handover, it was a pretty shining example, much of the time, of peaceful civil disobedience. Up until 2019, where it seemed patience ran out and we saw citywide unrest that lasted months, and it was somewhat of our baptism of fire as journalists, covering that on the front lines, vandalism, tear gas, pepper spray, etc. To the 2020 Beijing enacted security law, and in recent weeks, the 2024 locally enacted security law that doubled down on a lot of that legislation that has seen elections basically completely locked down, the opposition all behind bars or in self-exile or have quit politics. Newsrooms raided, journalists on trial with Apple Daily's Jimmy Lai facing life in prison. Dozens of civil society groups gone, including several news outlets. The public broadcasts are totally reined in. Bureaucratic and legal scrutiny of what remains of civil society and the media. And of course, no one dares speak, which is why myself as a foreigner with maybe a little bit more leeway and somewhat representing the situation in journalism there, also while the government has said nothing has changed. And briefly, Hong Kong Free Press, we were the first crowd-funded news outlet and remain the only English language independent media in Hong Kong in a news landscape that's dominated by outlets that are outright owned by China or by Chinese conglomerates or those with business interests in the mainland. Founded with $100 in the wake of the 2014 umbrella movement. We're a non-profit, no shareholders, no tycoons, and we're just a team of 9 now, and just taking one day at a time as we seek to occupy the remaining space.
Thank you, Tom. And Ragdan, you're from Sudan.
I am from Sudan. Hi, my name is Ragdan Orsut. I'm a co-founder of Beam Reports. Beam Reports is a Sudanese media entity that is dedicated to countering misinformation, disinformation in Sudan. When we started, it was all glowing. We started after the revolution. The space was opening up. 2 months after we started, a coup happened. And since then, it has been downhill. There was protests and now the war. So speaking about Sudan, there is an ongoing war since April 15, 2023. Ended up in being the largest displacement crisis, and no one talks about that, and that's why I'm here. The fight started between a militia and the army, a militia that was started by the army back in the days to fight for them in Darfur and other parts of the country. People refer to it as, quite often when I read it online, as a civil war. But it was way beyond that. There is definitely foreign powers that are supporting this this ongoing war. They're supporting it offline, on the ground, but also media is being used as a tool of war. And that's why entities like ourselves is essential in fighting it. So I'm going to keep it here, but we can talk about it. Go ahead.
Thank you. Sunny, please.
Hi, I'm Sunny. Sunny Sui from Myanmar. Very glad to be here and very honored to be here. I'm the co-founder of Frontier Myanmar, which is 9.5 years old. And it's an in-depth, investigative. We started as a weekly magazine, and we have a team of 43. It's been a really interesting journey so far. So basically, just a brief background about Myanmar. Myanmar media started opening up around 2010. But then, after the military coup in 2021, it's basically plunged our press freedom. So right after the February 1st, 2021, military started revoking the license of the mainstream media, and they started narrowing down the bandwidth. They banned Facebook and other social media, and they blacklisted pretty much all the websites apart from the government websites. Basically, more than 100 journalists were detained, and still, I think, around 55 still behind the bars. All the journalists are being, all the newsrooms are being raided, journalists arrested, tortured, and some being killed during the interrogation. So basically what military is doing is they are trying to crush the independent media in Myanmar and trying to kick everyone out of Myanmar so that there is no independent media available. We were trying to cover everything inside Myanmar for about 8 months, and finally we're getting a lot of pressure. 2 of our editors were detained, arrested. 1 regular columnist got arrested. 2 of our photographers were shot. One is with the live bullet, another one is with a rubber bullet. And 3 of our reporters' houses were raided. That was when we decided to leave, and we relocated successfully to northern Thailand, Chiang Mai, 2.5 years ago, and since then we are reporting outside of Myanmar. And just about a brief situation about Myanmar, right? So since the coup, everybody against the military, and if you look at our country, northeast, southwest, everywhere is a conflict now, very heavy, very intense fighting, everyday bombshells, airstrikes, explosions, even in the big cities, there are explosions here and there, and people are getting murdered every day. So that's pretty much the background where I'm coming and what we're reporting. Thanks.
Thank you. And Sevgil, you're still in Kiev.
Yeah. First of all, thanks for coming today, but because it's early morning for me, 9:30. So it means that this topic is very valuable for you and for me, of course. Usually I represent myself, the Ukrainian journalist from Crimea, and for me this is a part of identity because I'm originally from Crimea. And for me this war started in Ukraine, started actually not in 2022, but in 2014 with occupation of Crimea. And actually my family first left from Crimea. Some of my friends were arrested in Crimea, and actually the same situation with the media landscape, that unfortunately after 1 year of occupation of Crimea, all media, all independent media, all Ukrainian media forced to leave from Crimea. This is just the beginning, and it's important to highlight that this is something that started not on February 24th, it started earlier in 2014. And for me, as a Crimean, of course, it was a sign that this is just the beginning. But nobody took me seriously, even when I also participated in many conferences, and when I said that, okay, Putin will not stop with Crimea and occupation the part of Donbass, it will be a big war, and big war started for us and for the rest of the world on February 24th, 2022. Some words about, actually, can I switch to the presentation? Some words just for understanding about our media. Ukrainska Pravda, one of the biggest, one of the first online media in our country. I want to mention this guy. This is Georgi Gangadze. He had a birthday 2 days ago. He's a founder of Ukrainska Pravda, and he was killed just after 6 months of existence of Ukrainska Pravda. And this is an important event for what I will tell after, because it was a tipping point for Ukrainian journalism, and it led to accusation against the government, the protest, and then these protests led to Maidan, the first Maidan in our country in 2004. And actually, I think this is very important case not only in journalism in Ukraine, but also in political life in Ukraine. And here I want to mention like Ukrainska Pravda before 24th of February 2022. You see, like we had 1 million readers, 26 million visits in 1 month, 8 departments and 60 employees. This is me. Oh, sorry. Okay. This is me on February 24th. Like how war started for me personally as an editor-in-chief, and how the audience have actually it impacted all medias and all journalists in Ukraine. So we mostly providing quick news, documentation of Russian war crimes, searching the assets of Russian oligarchs and Russian elite. And this is the growing of our audience in the first days of war. You see, compared to what I mentioned before, 1 million readers to 7 million unique visitors per day. So this is about the role of journalism and the role of clear information news in crisis. So I will later continue with other things, and actually English version that we launched in in February 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. You are truly the heroes of journalism on the front lines of conflicts. Can you please give the audience an idea of sort of of the circumstances of sort of your typical day that would be a very atypical to any other person in this room? What is it like to be a journalist under these circumstances? Please, who wants to start? Go ahead, Sevgil.
Oh, okay. So I wake up usually like at 7 and 8, and I'm really happy all the time when I wake up in Kiev, because Kiev is still Ukraine is still free, Kiev is still independent. I'm happy. So my day usually starts with realizing that we are still in Kiev, we are still free Ukraine, and this is already a victory for us. And of course, I also try to understand which day of war it's now, and then of course focus on some news and what's actually happened during the night, how many missile attacks took place in different cities, and actually how many people died in other cities. And sometimes it's absolutely terrible. I still remember the morning of 6th of June last year, when Kakhovka Dam was damaged by Russians, and it's one of the, I think, difficult days for Ukrainians, even after the year. So usually, if you ask me about challenges journalists face in the mornings or every single day, first of all this is an existential war for us. This is an existential threat, and a lot of people, a lot of our colleagues, a lot of our natives joined an army, for example. And of course, we think about their lives. Are they alive? What's going on in the front line? So this war is not something that we cover. This war is happening with us right now. And other challenges, of course, it's important to mention that we have, for example, electricity outages in Ukraine now. For example, 2 years ago, it was very challenging. I mean, autumn 2022, when actually I'm a chief editor of Ukrainska Pravda, was trying to find 2 canisters of oil just to be able to generator to work, just because we have to produce the news, and how we worked without internet, etc. Now, of course, challenges are safety of our team, because we still have a lot of reporters cover this war in the front line. Actually, mobilization, which is also a challenge, because some of our colleagues decided to join an army, and I do respect this choice, for example. But now we have a law of mobilization, and actually a lot of people will join an army, not voluntarily, but because it's law. And at the same time, because as I mentioned, Ukrainska Pravda was very important media and for democratic transition of our country, we are still following this way. And this is important to mention, that Ukraine remains democracy at war, thanks to actually journalists and civil society. And even with this existential threat, we're still able to cover our own problems, our own corruption, for example, and journalists play a significant role with investigative reporting. So even in times of crisis, even in times of existential threat, we are still able to continue our work and do positive changes, which is important.
Thank you. What about Tom? What about a typical day for you in Hong Kong?
I get my hands dirty with some of the reporting, but also the recruitment, all the fundraising, technical side, HR, PR, but it just changed a lot over the years. You got 2 months of straightforward sort of peace. I mean, we got 5 years of relative normality, and then all hell broke loose in 2019. What began in mass, imagine 1 or 2 million people on the streets in a city of 7 million, that's a huge proportion. It seemed business as usual, but we went from wearing, N95 masks to full face gas masks. And I would always have a little bit of, privilege being a foreigner on the front lines until I wore that mask. And then within minutes, I was thrown up a wall by a cop. So that didn't last very long. And it was a blur. I would just get up and you just wake up into this matrix with things escalating and coming home covered in pepper spray and whatever. Again, nothing compared to what a lot of you guys have faced. It was the best of times and the worst of times in a way, because we also had press freedom to report. And since then, we went straight into the COVID situation, where we had the highest death rate in the world. So we were all medical reporters suddenly, navigating that. And as the security law came in 2020, I spent a good 2 years basically shitting my pants. I mean, I thought it was just a matter of time to get the knock on the door. Having a bit of a crisis, moving to an outlying island, getting tattoos and a dog. We were joking about getting a dog yesterday in terms of to try and help with your anxiety, but I have a very anxious dog. So we both look at each other when the door goes, and it turns out it's the bloody Amazon man or whatever. But it's just not sustainable to be scared 24/7. And I don't know what it was, but decided after a while not to be. But I have a much more vulnerable team of 8 or 9 journalists to think about. So we professionalized, adopted a very long ethics code, and when your own lawyer flees, it's there's something going on. We had a columnist who also left. Now we've ended up being court reporters, as these cases are still going through the courts 4 or 5 years later. And my full-time job now is just navigating the red lines. Every single story that goes up, we have to think quite carefully about. And as much as I would say we managed to get the local daily news out, there have been compromises, and we have to be very selective when it comes to opinion and features and things like that. But yeah, I have to admit, it's not what we signed up for. We have got whiplash in terms of how fast the situation has changed. But one day at a time, we have decided that it's better to be in there now and to carry on.
Do you want to comment, Ragnar or Sonny?
Yeah, I can go next. I don't have a good answer. I loved how you start your morning, thankful that you're alive and awake. For me, mornings are scary. My day is usually consisting of like a number of panic attacks throughout the day. The first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is frequently check my phone just to make sure my stuff is okay. I'm lucky to be outside of Sudan right now, but I have a team of 21. 8 of them are in the country. So every morning I wake up to go as fast as possible through my messages just to make sure everyone is okay, do some wellness check, which I do throughout the day. But yeah, I think the mornings are scary, just to make sure everyone is okay. It's one thing to worry for yourself and to make that decision that, you know what, I'm gonna stop being scared. I'm here for it. But when you're scared for other people who you're responsible for, it's a whole other scenario, I think. So my day is scary. My day consists of, as I said, wellness checks. My day consists of trying to add some positivity to the team that is working on the ground. My team consists of trying to send them training materials, training opportunities, even if it's just online, just to keep their head up and to keep them looking at the future, because it's so easy to get lost in the day-to-day. Like we're all reporting on very personal crises, right? When the war started, I remember in the very first day of the war, I was still outside of Sudan. My family was in, and we had our team meeting. It was a weekend, so luckily no one was in the office. But we had our team meeting, and I logged in just in case some of them was online and wanted help, right? That's all I did. I joined, and the entire team was online. So I have a bit of a crazy team, actually. I don't know how they did that, but they did it. And when I joined, of course, again, being worried about them, I'm like, okay, are you safe? What are we going to do? How are your neighborhoods? And everyone was like, we're okay. We're still here, but what are we going to do? And for that energy and that spirit and that persistence and that insisting on continue to provide info, even if you are getting targeted yourself, is why I get scared the most every morning when I wake up, because I created this crazy team that would not stop under any circumstances, but I'm still responsible of them. My phone does not leave me. It's right here, and I keep looking at it. It's with me in the bathroom, just in case. So it's a bit of PTSD, I would say. So it's not really easy mornings, but we keep trying. Yeah.
With a smile on your face, I don't know how you do
Yeah,
it.
how do you do it? Yeah, what about you, Sonny?
Well, my normal days are pretty much filling with the uncertainties, because we don't really expect what is going to happen next. As a founder, as a publisher, I am responsible for my team's security, well-being, everything basically, their happiness, and so forth. So, it's the same when journalism become a crime. The country that we live in. This is how the narrative is, right? They've been running this campaign that journalists are so bad, and they're dangerous. So that sort of narratives one-sidedly run, and then people start to believe. And we can't really even reveal ourselves that we are journalists, because it's quite dangerous, because some informer will go and inform to the police or the intelligence, and you get arrested the next day. So basically, if the landlord knows that you're a journalist, you get kicked out because they don't want to deal with you whatsoever. So that sort of thing. So basically, same with you right now. I kept looking at my phones, like, what are the problems for today? Maybe I have 200 problems, usual problems as a publisher, but it's kind of, it goes around and comes around all the time. And when you and your dog, I have the same problem. Back in Yangon, I was basically moving around, and 3 days in this house, another location in 4 days. That's how we had to move around, me and my team members as well. So like finally I was in this condo, pretty new for me, and I didn't know that it was, I knew that there was the port container yard there, but I didn't know that the schedule, like they would just drive during the curfew time and it would be okay. Or, and then I will hear like huge trucks, 4 or 5 trucks coming, and I'll be so scared. I didn't want to look to the window. I was like, oh, okay, they're coming for me. So that sort of thing. Like when you panic, especially when you panic, you started seeing things and you started imagine things. And like every morning, 4 o'clock or 3:45, the government, the YCDC, who clean up the trash, this car will come, and I thought it was a military truck. So that sort of thing, right? But even now, I moved to Thailand, Chiang Mai. I don't think we should take everything, it's okay, because anything could happen. Like for example, this morning, I have a text from one of my team members saying that, Thai authorities are starting to detain Myanmar exile, people in exile. And I was like, whoa. Then, I know that was a very short message, but it completely woke me up. And I was like, okay, all right, so what am I going to do now? So I was panicked, and I texted my editor-in-chief saying that, hey, today's office day, why don't we just clear everyone to go home and just work from home, blah, blah, blah. Then, my editor-in-chief Ben saying that, where did you hear this? Where did you hear that? Da, da, da. So I said, I started calling my friends, and it was true, but for the separate, different reason that we have nothing to do with. So that sort of worries that we have to wear every day on a daily basis, not knowing what is coming next. That's probably the adventure part of our site, I think. Thank you.
Sounds unbelievable. Now, there are many people in this room probably who think, how would I do that? So what kind of advice would you give to other journalists in these kind of situations? What kind of safety measures or self-censorship measures or measures you to protect the people you interview, you have to deal with? If you can please give a couple of concrete examples of those. And how do you then sort of, in your mind, how do you reconcile those measures with the journalistic standards? And please, you don't all have to answer. If somebody wants to start and give an example.
I think I can start. Because it's my biggest lesson learned. I mentioned earlier that when we started Beam Reports, it was after a beautiful revolution in Sudan. The space was opening up. People were excited. We started this entity. We had a launch, invited people, journalists and others. And a bit naive, I would say, giving the context, or maybe too excited. I don't know. It was a fine line between these two anyway. But we had the entire About Us section on our website was updated with our staff member or their profiles, because it was also a unique, it's a very different media in Sudan that we were starting that had a bit of data journalism and research and fact checking and all of that. So we were very excited about it, and we want to show their expertise and their profile. So we started August 2021 with all of that information up with people invited to our launch in August as well. And 2 months in, everything, I mean, excuse my French, but shit hit the fan. And we had to take immediately all of that out, but the information was out. And that was our biggest lesson learned, I think. If you operate in a contest like this, just don't get too excited, even if it's an exciting moment. Just keep your eyes on the prize, which is keeping your staff safe. We have managed to survive that somehow. The reason we're surviving still now and that we still have people on the ground is that no one knows who's the Beam Reports team is, other than me, where I go to conferences and I talk to people, because people still need a face. But everyone else is very low profile. Even some of them, even their families do not know, because we are one of those media entities that are hated by the two parties at conflict. We fact check them, so equally hated. So that would be my lessons learned. Even if it's an exciting moment, just think about the long term. Maybe not everybody, maybe personas rather than their pictures. I think that was my biggest lessons learned.
We were saying yesterday that the job is difficult, the hours are long, the pay is low, but at least everyone hates you.
Yep, that's exactly it.
You must be doing something right if both sides hate you. And Sunny, when you describe your day, it's not as if we're not immune to all the regular stuff that we talk about at the conference, to do with the threat of AI and social media and all the normal stuff, and you had this added dimension, For us, it's kind of not knowing these vague red lines, you call them invisible lines, not wanting to step on a landmine, and they keep changing. I can name now some of the sensitive issues. It used to be Tiananmen, Tibet, and Taiwan, the 3 Ts. Then you got Xinjiang, calls for Hong Kong independence, calls for protest ballots, discussion about sanctions, anything to do with the wanted activists abroad who, as of last year, it was unthinkable, 18 months ago, but they've started to go after their families in Hong Kong, just as in China is happening now in Hong Kong. And the power of keeping it fuzzy, keeping it vague, is that the rational thing to do for many in civil society and in media is to pull back, overcompensate, and stay way away. So you end up teaching power what it can do, because people will do more than what's possibly required. And the other thing I think is different and notable is I speak to people who think that, you very much can get your door bashed down and your newsroom raided, but so often it happens in a lot more imaginative and innovative, indirect ways, bureaucratic and legal means. So I spend a lot of time waking up, sweating over, did I do something slightly wrong with the accounting in 2016, or is all of our pension stuff and insurance in place, and so that they don't go for you in that kind of way as well, so to wear you down.
Into little details that have nothing to do with journalism as a way to protect.
That's so much
journalists.
of it. But of course, the small things to do with journalism, like the staff byline, safety, security, encryption, how we deal with headlines, waiting for that government response before you publish, allowing more. So adjusting the ethical standards so you give people quote check so they can see what you're about to publish sometimes, or lowering the bar for when you would allow anonymity. And of course, people don't want to talk, whether you're on the establishment or government side. Why leave your safe space and speak to someone like us who might say something wrong? And for what's left of any opposition-minded people, well, they would be crazy. What's in it for them, to speak as well? And I'm sure all of you have trouble getting people to speak as well now.
What are the safety measures that you would recommend?
Okay, I have a lot of things to say, but I want to share the story of my colleague who was killed in the start of the war, Brent Renaud, who actually was the first American journalist killed in the war in Ukraine. And he had a slide with Ukrainian journalists killed in this war, and this is very painful when you lost your colleagues. But this situation helped me to understand and learn some lessons. And the first one was actually that I had to inform my sister, because it was her boyfriend, her partner. He came to Ukraine to film a documentary about Ukrainian refugees, and he went to European together with my other classmate, Juan Redondo. And they, Brent Renaud was shot dead, Juan was wounded, and the first one moral dilemma was to inform my sister about that death, and you have to be 100% sure that this is truth. And I have this feeling now when I need to inform people about some bad things. I'm thinking about my sister, how I will tell that that I'm 100% sure, or I'm not 100% sure that this is truth. The second one, this risk assessment and risk management. You're absolutely right. Unfortunately, Brand went to this very dangerous place without a helmet, and this is one. Was a big mistake, and now I think about my colleagues how they go to some front lines. For example, we have a very brave journalist, Olya Kirilenko, who is just 25 years ago, and of course she wants to travel in dangerous zone. But usually I ask her, where you want to go? And then I have some good relations with my colleagues, press officers in different brigades, and I ask them, is it dangerous or no? Okay, maybe in 2 days we have to, it will be better, and then of course, I give you, for example, something else to do, not to travel to this war zone, maybe in 2 days. Don't tell them, don't tell her, please. I see some Ukrainian journalists, please don't tell Olya that this is about risk assessment and management, not something very special she has to write right now. And the third one, I think that usually I tell my team, you are the eyes and you are the voice of this war, and so this is important. And very important to understand that we have to tell the story of this war. Nobody will tell the story of this war. Yesterday we discussed about how, for example, we feel fatigue of the war, how things getting normal, for example, even with Palestine, etc. So only local journalists will continue to cover the war inside the country. Tomorrow CNN will go, New York Times will go, but we are still here, and that's why it's important to be here and to be healthy and to be able to tell the story. And here I want to mention my friend Juan Arredonca. Actually, Brandt and Juan traveled because to this very dangerous place, Irpin, to show the evacuation of women with children, as they dreamed to show this story. And unfortunately, when Juan Arredondo was wounded, he traveled with evacuation train to Lviv to another one surgery, and he told me, I saw this woman, they were singing Ukrainian songs, and I'm wounded, I'm not able to film them, and it was kind of the main regret of the journalist that time, that he's not able to tell this story. So I suggest everyone to think about it. So you can risk, but at the same you have to understand that you are the only one who can the story, and that's when you have to be healthy and you have to take care of yourself.
That's very good. That's a very good lead up to the next subject too. How do you, I mean, coming from a privileged, peaceful country with no conflict, I have the utmost respect for you, but I'm also wondering, how do you keep your head straight? I mean, how do you protect yourself? And what keeps you motivated? Because I'm sure you all have thought whether I should just stay or go. And it must be sort of a daily or weekly thinking going through your heads. What can I do? So how do you protect yourself? How do you keep yourselves motivated? Please.
Last night because, it would be nice to say, oh, we're so brave, like we do. You know, it's so much meaning. And no, we shit ourselves every single day and wonder, what the hell are we doing? Why don't we just leave? Why can't we have an easy life? Yeah, every day, right? Every day. It's ridiculous.
And who's okay? Is anyone here okay?
we don't know the answer. I don't know how. You just get up and you kind of... Sometimes I do skip to work because you're like, oh, shit, this has me... Sorry for my swearing, by the way. I'm a news person. But, like... You skip to work someday because it suddenly has meaning. All the wax lyrical we used to do in our promo videos about we're the freest independent media, it bloody means something now. And and you say your staff are a bunch of badasses, mine too. They're local Chinese, for God's sake, and would face a lot more consequences than me. And I guess I think one of the questions was about why or what your greatest achievements are. Hey, it's to get to tomorrow. People would ask, what's your 5-year plan and whatever. It's like when you check your phone, you're writing the first draft of history, and okay, you may not have the high-minded journalistic ambitions of enacting change and all of this that we were taught about, but to be able to, for us, get it down in English, the global lingua franca, to be on the ground and to be reporting accurately, knowing that if we were to leave, we would lose the few privileges we have that are already lost in mainland China in terms of still kind of being able to ask tough questions of officials, go and bear witness at court, go to the legislature. None of that you can do 20 miles north of Hong Kong. So measures of success, that I think is enough to get to tomorrow, and we can see our reporting, cited everywhere. So, it changes. What your red lines are, I just felt they kept changing. So you'd be like, oh, if they arrest a journalist, I'm out of here. And then that happened, and you're kind of still around, and you're like, oh, well, if they raid a newsroom, adios, I'm on Cathay Pacific, see you later. And yeah, that kind of happened. And then they went for our kind of digital media cousins at Stan News, and lo and behold, this red line passes and you're still around. But I do think there is, I don't know what your bottom lines are, but for us it is the daily hard news reporting, which we can just about still get out. And for that, I think makes it still worth to be around, because if you leave, you lose the accuracy and the nuance, and you're not on the ground able to speak to people.
Well, somebody has to do the job, right? So
yeah,
that's
I guess none of
the
us
thing.
Nominated ourselves and may not do it.
Well, we're not brave or anything like that. But then, if one of you were pushed into that sort of corner, you have no choice but to deal with the consequences, situation every day. Then you become, like this. You have no choice. But then, like Tom, I really want to add this. I get away with this trip, this time, this coup. I get away with pretty much all the danger because of the preemptive move that I made. I didn't wait till I get into trouble. So basically, I kind of avoid for instance, I returned my publishing license before they raided my newsroom. I saw other newsroom get raided, so I was like, all right, I'm gonna have to return the license, and then I relocate and I shift everything into another entity, under another entity. So like, don't take anything for granted, because you are dealing with the fire every day. I mean, more than dangerous. You can't even guess what they're going to do to you. So the best thing is to be alert all the time and just, you gotta. I was very serious about every make that I move, every move that I make. So and very preemptively I do it, because last time I had a big lesson learned, and I thought, okay, I didn't do anything wrong, I didn't break any laws, but then they still throw me in jail and sentence me for 14 years. So that was a big lesson learned for me, and I will never take anything for granted from then onwards.
Oh, what about you, Ragdan and Sevdil? What keeps you going?
Well, so I thought about it. I've been thinking about it since yesterday, actually. And I think, I think what keeps me going is two reasons. The first one is that I mentioned earlier, this is, to me, it's not a civil war. There are two military or two militia, one military, one militia, who are destroying the country, right, and displacing us. And the reason I say this is because they have targeted everything that has a historical value. They have targeted universities. They have targeted libraries. Our history is gone. Like, anything that is hard copy is gone. And Sudan is not that tech savvy, so we don't have much online either. So for me, the reason that keeps me going, because I feel like we are keeping track of the truth, right? We are documenting, and I don't even do it for my generation. I do it for my kids. What would I tell them about Sudan? I don't have any documentation of it. I'm hoping the reports that we are publishing on a daily basis, with the timelines, focusing on trustworthy news, focusing on the truth, is going to get the next generation a bit of glimpse of what Sudan was, because I don't know if we will ever get that Sudan back again. that would be the reason that my team would approve of me saying publicly. The other reason that keeps me going is that I know for a fact I'm pissing them off. I can't fight them on the ground. I don't have the weapons. I don't even have the courage to do that. But I can fight them with the truth online every day. Because I mentioned earlier, there is a well-funded, well-planned propagandas by both parties. And I'm here to keep track of the truth every day in, and they cannot change this history. They cannot change the narrative. I'm telling it as is, and I know for a fact I pissed them, and that just what keeps me going. I love it.
Thank you. What about you, Sabil?
I will say responsibility first of all. Team. We have 150 people now out inside our team, and I feel responsible for them. Of course, this is the first part. The second one, the audience. We have a big audience, and I think about readers all the time, and reader actually in the first place for everyone. So we have even in our principles and rules of Ukrainska Pravda this quote that the readers in the first place do remember that, and reader doesn't care, are you okay or not? He needs news, and news during the wartime, this is about something that is very important and valuable, clear information about what's going on. It's literally, life depends from that information, and I'm not kidding. Like, I remember how I went to this the occupied villages after the liberation of Kiev region, and how people cried that. So, and they told me, and actually I want to repeat this phrase one more. Yesterday I heard it from journalists from Bosnia, that the most hardest thing was be without news, not even without water, because you didn't know how to make your decisions and what to do. Green corridors, not green corridors, evacuation, who controls the village? It's more difficult than don't have a water or food. But what else? Of course, as I mentioned, this is an existential threat for us. We have two choices: to be occupied by Russia, or to be free. So that's why we have to fight. We don't have other choice, and this is actually a feeling that all Ukrainians have now. But also, I can suggest you good antidepressants after the session. I'm kidding.
Yesterday, when we talked with you, you said that international attention and people caring for what happens in your countries is a motivating factor, and also one of the reasons you do this job. But as we all know, there are so many international crises now, and people's attention is very limited, news avoidance is up. How do you keep the international audience or even the audience within your countries interested in a long-going conflict? Do you have data on what kind of stories is your audience interested in?
It's not an easy question. I think in terms of Sudanese readers in Sudan and diaspora, we had to keep it agile and move with adaptability, and just be mindful of how they consume news and how that changes as you're going through conflict yourself, as you are trying to cross borders, but you're still, it's a daily thing you need to know. So we have definitely changed how we produce it. Like, the news is still there, but it's like much shorter, summarized, easy to consume, infographics, because you are on the go, and that's if you have internet and power, right? We just want to give you what you care for, and that can help inform your decision in the shortest possible way. And so we definitely shifted. Our fact-checking used to be like very, not lengthy, but explains the situation and has a media literacy component that helps people, as you go, this is how you spot misinformation. Throughout the war, it was just a poster that tells you this is true or not.
Yeah.
Because that's all that people could afford to consume as they were going through it. But back to your question, I find the first one is extremely hard, how to get international community to continue to care. It breaks my heart to think about the journalism and the media space and the international donors who support media freedoms around the world, to think of them as people who just follow clickbaits, right? It's the sexy crisis, so we all put all the funding there. I get wanting to be part of that and supporting it, but if you are in the media development supporting freedom of speech, you are in it for the long run. You're not in it for, the crisis of the headlines. This is not it, and it's not something that we should bear responsible of, like reminding people of. Like you're in it for a reason, and you need to keep track of that reason. I do not believe there is a lack of funding in the world that could go to all crises, right? There's a lot of crises, but there's also a lot of funding that comes from different government, private donors, all of that. It's just that, are we, as a donor, do I want to say like, oh, I supported Palestine because it's more in the news, or am I more mindful of what Myanmar is going for 3 years now? 3 years, right? So I don't, honestly, I'm not here to keep them engaged. If you are not following politics, Sudan, for example, is 100% a regional problem. If you don't care about Sudan, you should care about Chad, South Sudan, Egypt, Libya, and the whole Horn, right? And if you don't care, I can't make you care. It's a very regional problem, and it just spreads. So I'm here for my Sudanese audience, because no one is speaking to them. I'm here to keep them updated. I'm here to help them make informed decisions. I'm here to have them, to make them able to, once we have a government, to be able to actively participate in their communities. That's what I'm here for.
Do you wanna
For Frontier, I think what we are reporting now is coup, how the military coup impact to different sectors. So we are doing in-depth investigative pieces every day. So we stay away from breaking news, because there are plenty of breaking news, waves of breaking news coming to us every day anyway. And also, starting from 2019, we started a community, Frontier community, that really cares the real journalism and understanding the importance of journalism. And so basically, we are sending daily newsletters. Basically, within 24 hours, what happened, why this happens, like a mini analysis. That's a daily briefing. Another one is a media monitoring. We basically collect, monitor all the headlines, both government and public, and that's for our readers. And also for international audience, I think it's important. I mean, we are doing English, so it's quite an easy reach to international audience. And also, part of our community, it's half of them are foreigners, half local. And what we are trying to do is, we are trying to highlight this like social impact, or what is wrong with the economy because of the coup. And every sector we try to approach from different angles, and that's how we keep informing to the others. And also we do cross-border reporting with outlets from Denmark, and we are also working something with someone from Taiwan. And we do have past articles. We have a couple of cross-border reporting as well. And it's important to monitor and explain what is really going on in Myanmar, instead of what people are reading on the social platforms. Can be very, very different. And as long as they keep our newsletter, or they read our content, and then they are trying to make the right decision, I think we're very happy about that.
Yeah. Before opening up to the questions, I'd like to have one more question to you. Do you still believe in the power of journalism, that it can change things? And if you do, can you give me some examples of hopeful stories that have sort of changed the world or the conflict?
I don't have any hope. I'll answer the last question instead. There's a bit of paranoia about foreign forces and foreign groups and audiences or whatever. It may be problematic. We're IPI members, let alone me being here. But for us, I asked the team to write for someone who just awoke from a coma, or for their grandma in Vancouver, who may not know what's going on. I mean, our stories are not in the news that much anymore. We do monthly roundups of the crackdown and weekly roundups of the news, and we try and just write in a concise and understandable way to cast the net as wide as possible to anyone who may be interested in learning about that corner of the world from an academic interest or whatever standpoint definitively. You know, we are writing that first draft. It will end up on Factiva or whatever forever, hopefully. And we see it cited in government reports and Wikipedia, etc. That's something. But for Hong Kong, at least, I would say our situation, we used to talk about bridging the gap between Chinese and English, or charting the city's integration into China. Now I think we are recording the process that previously we would describe as death by a thousand cuts or a slow boiling frog, but I don't think it's very slow anymore, the situation, whereby it's a guidebook on how to turn a semi-democratic territory into low-key authoritarianism without blood over the course of just a couple of years. Sorry, I've forgotten your final question. But
we believe in the power of journalism to change things.
Of course, and we keep the journalistic tradition at the front of our minds and all of that stuff, and our very long ethics code, etc., and try and keep the security law, because we're not going out to break the law, you know, at the back of our minds. If you swap them around, you will self-censor, and that's already rife in Hong Kong, and our structure at least allows us some capacity to occupy the remaining space. Maria Reza talks about holding the line. We talk about ensuring that we occupy that space, because if we don't, no one else can be trusted, and it will just close up. One of the things we didn't touch on is that, I don't know about your situation, but 3 of the 4 of us, we have funding crises as well. So it's worth remembering that only this is possible because of the importance we need to convince people to support, you know, free and independent media, and with all the financial crisis going on in media at the same time, it's tough for even us to tackle that crisis, you know, too. But that's certainly a big issue with all of our newsrooms as well.
And what about you in Ukraine? Do you believe that the journalism has a meaning?
Can
still?
I have slides? I just want to show one picture and one slide. Okay. This is about actually the way how we worked in the beginning of war, when we published a list of Russian yachts in our website, and then I received a call from ambassador of one of European country, and he said, okay, could you send me this in English? And I said, okay. And then in 2 days, all these yachts were arrested. This is about an impact during the war. Here we found the yacht of, you know, Kadyrov, who is a head of Chechnya. And we published this information. Here actually some stories how our journalists were affected by war, and how they, for example, one of our journalists' dad was killed in Bucha, and he wrote the story about it. But I want to show this picture. Actually, this is a story made by our reporter Oля Kirilenko and Dmitry Larin. They just evacuated this woman to the safe zone, to her family, and this is a photo how family was reunited after 2 months without even know is she alive or not. So this is about an impact, even in such stories. But and this is the impact of all Ukrainian investigative reporting. Even in times of war with existential threat, investigative reporters in Ukraine still able to continue their work. And some, you see the all topics we covered during these 2 years of war. And actually after this investigation, some people were fired. In some cases, it helped to earn money for our state budget. So this is about the power of journalism in Ukraine. And in Ukraine, journalism does matter. Journalism became a tipping point for democracy, and its impact is very, very high.
Thank you. Very powerful words from all of you. Now, let's open it up for questions. Does anybody in the audience want to ask something? And please introduce yourselves. Lady in the back.
Hello. Does it work? Yeah, okay. I'm Katerina Sergatskova. I'm journalist, war reporter, and now leading a safety organization that helps journalists and civil society actors in Ukraine. So I think what I wanted to ask you all, because you all recognize the safety threats in your organizations, newsrooms, what do you need to ensure safety in your organizations and in your professional life? And I think what I'm asking, what do you lack of? Resources, information, whatever you think it's important to say. And my question is very practical, so please be as specific as possible. Thank you.
What resources do we need? We talked about safety and security. What resources? I can start. I think for us, it's definitely resources. But that built into the whole funding conversation and all of that. It's definitely resources. But when I say resources, is accessible resources, I would say. So I have worked with Internews Network for quite a bit. I am very aware of all as much as possible, of the resources that are available, the tools that are available for journalists to stay offline, safe online and offline, all of that. I returned to Sudan. I lived in DC at the time. I returned to Sudan, and I have realized that most of these tools are unavailable in Sudan because of the sanctions. And I kept looking. There's a lot of guidebooks, and we have been here for a while, so there is good guidebooks outside on the internet for journalists operating in contexts like ours. It rarely keeps in mind if these tools are available to everyone or not. Basic tools, just like VPNs. It's so hard to get a VPN that actually works in Sudan, which really, it defeats the purpose. So for Sudanese to get access to tools, we have to create them. And who has time while you're going through war? So for me, I think it's the resources bit. It's keeping different contexts and access to it. Because if you're thinking globally, then it has to be a global tool. Otherwise, it's just not functional.
List would be legal clarity, please. But I think we will not get that. There is somewhat of a hierarchy of risk within our newsroom of the mainland reporters, the local Chinese, and myself. I'm a permanent resident, but we would like to know how not to step on landmines. And if I go to a lawyer, they will say, there's no test cases, we don't know, don't do journalism. If I email the judiciary, the Department of Justice, or the police, or the chief executive of Hong Kong, and I want to know, can we utter one of the illegal phrases or this illegal song in our reporting? Often the answer will be, no one is above the law, everyone must obey the law, you must comply with the relevant rules and regulations. So they won't tell you. And so the burden literally falls upon the judgment of a handful of editors, pulling things out of my backside, basically, and trying to navigate that risk day by day as it evolves and changes. So I don't know who can give us that clarity. And as to resources, well, money, so we can just get the job done. But even then, I don't want $1 million. What's best for press freedom, as we show in our financial reports, is the fact that we have almost 1,000 donors donating the equivalent of $20, $30 a month, because then you're not answerable to one big tycoon or one, source of money that makes you vulnerable. And to shore up that groundswell of support has got tougher, and I'm sure it is for you guys, as the spotlight has faded.
What about you, Sonia and Sevgil? What kind of advice, practical safety measures would you advise to?
Trainings, first aid trainings, or trainings for safety for our journalists. Actually, we had one before the war in which I participated. It actually was the last one. We had several safety trainings for our team, but I had never time for that. So maybe, yes, it's important to know. I think that this is something that each Ukrainian has to have like this experience of first aid or safety training, because the war is going already like for 3 years, so it's one of the important thing you have to do. So maybe I'll have to, because yeah, it's important.
I agree with every one of you, but I think you know, I got sued last year, and I found out that how vulnerable we are in exile. Getting a lawyer, the expenses were raw. We got sued back in Yangon all the time, and I know how to fix it, but I didn't realize how vulnerable we are in exile, because everything is so different. Blah 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 blah. So yes, everything is needed. I'll give you a very good example. Like when I was in prison, my friends will come and visit or send me a letter and say, "Tell me what you need." I need everything. In prison, I need everything, right? It's the same thing here, right? But the thing is, I think what we want the most, I think, is the attention, highlights of international community, international media, what is happening in Myanmar, Sudan, Hong Kong. We've been underreported, and everything is not on the international headlines, and that's where I'm really worried about.
Thank you. Lady in the back there, in black.
Hi, Alison Campbell from Internews. I wonder if you guys could talk to us a little bit about, we've heard quite a bit about security, but the logistics of actual news gathering and how that works, and what the implications are for the quality of coverage, verification, reach in hard-to-reach areas, compromises that have to be made, physical business of getting news, all of that kind of thing. I understand a little bit from the those who are half in and half out, and exile and that kind of thing. But just more about the actual news gathering process, and any of the things that you've had to or been able to put in place to mitigate those kind of operational challenges.
I can start. For Sudan, at least when we started, we were all in Sudan. And I think the one smart thing, we have had our share of mistakes, of course, and lessons learned. But the one smart thing we did from the get-go is building networks across the country. We were not able to be everywhere. And if you follow Sudan, there were always these spaces and cities in Sudan that are hard to reach. So what we did from the get-go is connect and build networks. We connected with the doctor committees who had an excellent reach across the country. At the time, since the revolution, something called the resistant committees, which is like neighborhood committees, have started organizing. So we managed to connect with those two, build that relationship from the get-go. They had access to us because they didn't have the platform to share. So for when it was good, they had access to us, and we managed to build that relationship. It's the only way we're now able to get information from across the country. Our team are not able to move around. You can't move around. You have to get travel permits to travel, even as Sudanese right now. So our only way of gathering information is through that network. We're still in touch with them. It's calls. Of course, it puts more responsibility on trying to verify, and that's why we try to get like more than one source from the same city. We try to get pictures if possible. But that's literally how we gather news, and it's not just our team. The credit goes to a lot of different networks across Sudan for us to be able to still report from the ground up. Yeah.
Any other tips?
For us, is basically going straight into the conflict area, and because we do in-depth, and we cannot really rely on citizen journalists because they can be very emotional and they can be one-sided. So covering about Myanmar, especially the conflicts, we have to send our reporters to the conflict area, to the front lines. And we find it much easier to travel from Thai side into Myanmar side, rather than the other way around. So our reporters are always somewhere. They are all on the road, traveling and gathering news. That's how we do it.
I think we have time for one more question. There's a gentleman in the front.
Thank you all. I would like to take this opportunity to tell you that Al Jazeera Center for Public Liberties and Human Rights is annually organizing free workshop on the safety of journalists that started 5 years ago. Some of these workshops take place in Doha, some regionally in Africa, underdeveloped Asia, and Latin America. So you might find that interesting and useful, and with some training, of course. Al Jazeera English is trying, as you might have noticed, to bring the attention of the world and to be the voice for the voiceless, specifically in Africa, Latin America, and underdeveloped Asian countries. But I do agree still that's a bit underreported, but we hope together we can make it.
And I think also there is a gentleman in the middle, but I think also as well as news organizations like Al Jazeera, Red Cross provides safety training for journalists in different countries, so that might be another option to look at. And Reporters Without Borders, yes. Gentlemen, please.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me? Jesper Højberg from International Media Support. I may open up a big question now, which we may not have time to respond to. I think there's a problem, whereas I deeply respect you as individual actors in this field. When we talk about resilience and as upholding press freedom, we forget often to look to areas where we have actually had some success. And this is when you as individual media actors actually work together with your colleagues. And this is something I know that in each of your countries, especially I'm not so much on Hong Kong, I know on Sudan, on Myanmar, and Ukraine, the very power of also maintaining the attention of the international community, also when it comes to financing, is when you work together with your colleagues in alliances and networks to resist and push back on your governments when they are no longer the sort of the attention of the international community, because that time will come. One of you spoke about, the short time attention or attention span than the international community, and you have to be aware of that. We tell our colleagues in Gaza, be aware that one day the international community will leave you, so you have to prepare for that. And it's only if you get organized around the sector needs, not just your individual needs, not just the needs of the individual journalist, but actually the whole community of media in a given crisis country. So maybe just briefly, if you can say, what have you done? And because I know you are working in networks in each, at least in Sudan and Myanmar and in Ukraine, what are you doing to actually proactively foresee what is coming your way at some point, that the international community will leave you and there is not going to be enough financing for your important work?
Who wants to go?
I will go first. And thank you. I think our idea is to basically report whatever we see fit. I mean, the job that we supposed to do and keep doing it. And secondly, try to create own revenue so that we have a less headache for the future. And I think media and money doesn't really go well before, but now I think we always have to think that as long as we're not breaking any ethics, we're not bending any laws, and I think we can kind of create the different revenue stream for the future, and I think that will be the only way to do that. And of course, keeping the high quality journalism is the only survival for this kind of crisis at the moment. And then just keep working together with other outlets so that everybody recognize our work, and also, like today, the reason I'm here, it's because I just want to let everyone know that the crisis, the difficulties, challenges that we are facing in Myanmar, it's a lot. So that's what we're trying to do. Thank you.
I have to exempt myself from that question. Go on.
I echo everything you said. Again, I feel like this question puts the responsibility back on us to keep the international community engaged. And for me, I would like to not think it's not the way it should go, at least, right? For me, is continuing to produce really good quality content, right? Documenting as much as I can. We are part of each and every network you can think of, sir. We are part of of course, we are signatory with International Fact Check Network. It's where I advocate for Sudan and more funding for Sudan, and more attention to Sudan, and case studies with other fact checkers. I'm part of the Africa Check Network. I'm part of the Arabic, we're not Arabs, but we're Arabic-speaking entity. So we're part of the Arab Fact Check Network as well. We internally in Sudan, we are part of the Sudanese Syndicate. We work with the Sudan Media Forum. We work with the GMFD. You name it. We are there. We are here physically. This was not an easy trip. The reason I'm here is exactly to respond to your question. If our content is not getting to you, to your desk, I'm here, I'm speaking to you, sir. I genuinely don't know what else to do.
I'd just say, for us, it's illegal. You cannot take funds from foreign entities. It's problematic, I think, that we are possibly IPI members. I noticed other news outlets dropped out of a regional coalition that's Hong Kong-based a few weeks ago. Are they censoring in advance? Is it necessary? We feel the pressure now to drop out, you know. But that ship has sailed for us, unfortunately. And me speaking here is probably as good as it gets for international solidarity and that kind of thing. I wish it was different.
Well, thank you all for coming, and thank you for your important work. Let's give these people an applause for all the work that they are doing.
So the Bursting Bubbles session will take place tomorrow morning, and today we moved the early morning session from yesterday to now. We're really excited to discuss audience technology, audience engagement with technology. What are these organizations building? How are they thinking about bringing technology into their newsrooms? How are they engaging with their audiences? So really going to be a fascinating, stimulating discussion here. Ariadne will be moderating the talk today. She is the impact director at Lighthouse Reports. She's based in Greece, but this is a really interesting investigative unit that works with other media companies, publishers in different outlets, and is also figuring out ways to better engage with their audiences and fit that into their business model. So without further ado, Ariadne, take it away. Looking forward.
Quite bad. Is this better? No. I think they're for show. Okay, I'll project. It looks very serious.
Okay, so yeah, thank you, Ryan.
Now it works.
Thank you, IPI. Thank you, Renan. Thank you to my fellow panelists. I'm really excited to be here and have this conversation with you, and I'm really glad that IPI is centering this conversation about audience engagement and impact. As Ryan said, I am Ariadne Papagapitos. I am one of the directors at Lighthouse Reports and also responsible for our impact work. We are an investigative team that cooperates with media around the world, large and small, to deliver deeply reported investigations in the public interest, and on topics like conflict, climate, corruption, migration. And I think what is interesting in the context of the discussion we're about to have today is that because we are not a publisher, we are not a platform, and our stories come out on the sites of our media partners and in their pages, that we don't have to think about audience engagement in a traditional way of reaching huge audiences, of page views, of this kind of thing. And so that really frees us up to think strategically about impact and who we need to engage with specifically, that can use the journalism to make the most change in the world. So that's kind of my thing, and that's what I'm really excited to talk about today with this group of experts who are also similarly dealing with the same question in different formats across different cultural contexts, languages, geographies. I think we have at Lighthouse a lot to learn from you all about how you do that. And so this incredible group here is going to share with us some of the unique ways that they're doing this work, that they're centering their audience and learning from them and engaging them in unique ways. And as I said, they represent diverse geographies and speak to very different audiences, but they're all employing very creative strategies to do that. And I think that this really stands out in a landscape where local news is increasingly providing poorer quality information to its readers, and instead often stealing their data and repackaging it and selling it back to advertisers. So I think today, instead of just kind of hyping tech or promoting how we can all do more with less using tech tools, we're going to talk about how technology is being used as an extension of human creativity and ingenuity, in fact, and how it's being used to facilitate a deeper connection to local audience and local context. And ultimately how with limited resources we can actually contribute to creating much healthier local news ecosystems. So with that kind of framing, I am going to ask our panelists to introduce themselves and also share one unique way that you are using technology or something else to engage your audiences. And so, Tomasz?
Should I start? Hello, my name is Tomasz Bela. Yes, now you can turn me down. Thank you. I'm Tomasz Bela. I'm a co-founder of Denník, which was founded in Slovakia 10 years ago when a group of journalists decided we want our own newspaper, we don't want to work for bad guys, and we grew from zero to like the biggest newsroom in the country. We also have a second newspaper in Czech Republic and now also like Hungarian language service, so kind of like Central European thing. Most of our revenue come from subscriptions, about 60 to 70%. So that kind of tells you that from the beginning, it was the question of either we listen very carefully to what people want us to do, or we will not exist in half a year. And I think one of the interesting things there was very quickly we learned that for example, in terms of the technologies and the data, there is not lack of data, there is too much data telling you, and all kind of different metrics trying to tell you what you should be doing and what readers are doing. And our one like strange thing about our approach was that we chose like one metric at the beginning and said like this is going to be one metric that actually leads all our newsroom, not just the business side, but the newsroom, and that's actually conversions, you know, and that sounds very strange because we are like, so even like all the journalists in our company are expected to actually care about why people are paying for subscriptions and what kind of articles trigger them to subscribe. And we are leading, like this leads to all kind of like decision, it leads to decision of how we grew from 40 people to 110 journalists in a country. And the strange thing is that like 10, 15 years ago, we were kind of in depressing mood, all the industry that, you know, like people don't want to read long articles and people don't read anymore and people want short videos and so on. And the strange thing is that when we decided we don't care about page views, we don't even care about time spent, we don't care about all the metrics, we have thrown out all the tools that were there that we were buying, like Charbit and so on. And we only care about what people are telling us when they are buying subscriptions. And it turns out that what people are pushing us to do is to write longer articles, to write more investigative reporting, to write more long interviews, and so on. So, for example, our average article length more than doubled in 10 years, which is like very strange. Like we are writing completely different articles now than we were 10 years ago. And it's not because we would say to journalists, please write longer. Like we still don't like it if they write long articles, but it's because they are getting feedback and the readers are constantly telling us, no, don't do what everyone else is doing. But once I start reading the article, I actually want to read something that I never read before. So it makes it longer and longer, and more and more people are actually willing to pay for this. So that's like our strange place, and I'm looking forward to hear others.
Go ahead. 1, 2, 3. Hi, my name is Ano Harjo. I'm from Mongolia. So probably of every panelist on here, I'm probably the least experienced former journo already. I'm currently identifying as a financial education content creator and working in corporate sustainability at the moment. I used to work as a broadcast journalist in financial media and then in publishing, and now I'm creating content. Left journalism, creating content, the martyr who left the industry, but I'm hopefully be able to learn a lot from you guys and then also be able to share some useful insight into content creation and platforming. And as you can probably see, I do not have a platform to call, but the name is a platform itself. So it's one person, you're looking at it, the whole team. So I do have some access to a little bit of a limited resource. I probably won't be able to share what a new way of driving impact per se, but recently I've been trying out like radical messaging. Like earlier our panelists were saying they were using like messaging and such. So I'm using Instagram broadcast channels, which seems to be a very useful way of engaging with your audience without like at a low effort way. So I guess that's it. Ano, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Hi, morning. I'm Mungo Sogat. I'm the CEO of Scroller.Africa, and we're a mobile-only platform launched in South Africa, which serving low-income readers. And we've done quite a few, innovative things on the technical side to build trust in this crucial kind of audience. But before I think the one which resonates most with the question of the day is what we've done with data costs, which are a very significant barrier to entry for our readers, the readers that we're serving. But before I go into what we've done there briefly, just a teeny bit of personal context about how our use of this technology fits with our mission. So I started my career at an iconic South African newspaper called Mail and Guardian, which had a defining role pre and post apartheid. Went into business intelligence consulting, always wanted to go back to media. But then as I plotted my return, I kind of realized that I'd been kind of part of the problem, because all the great African publications, most of them rather, are essentially serve educated elite and kind of ignore vast section of the population, which is which underpin these fragile democracies. So we massive gap comes to Scroller. Our mission is to provide independent media to people who've got little time, little money, or who don't speak much English. And what we do is we kind of combine the serious and the fun. As we put it, we wrap the news that matters in the news that sells. So data costs. So data costs in South Africa are really high. And so what we did is we built a platform, super light platform called Data Light. We got a Google Award for it, and it uses about a tenth of the data of a normal site, and it compresses everything in an automated process from our main site and has fail-safes to prevent a big picture kind of messing everything up. And that's basically that's underpinned our audience growth from the beginning. We launched in the middle of COVID 4 years ago, and talking about data costs here for a lot of us, it kind of sounds a bit weird, but it's a massively sensitive thing. So even relatively wealthy people, say an Uber driver in an urban area in South Africa, will be very wary of using their phone to download and to use the net. So essentially it's been a kind of crucial part of our plan, and it will change. We're going to lose this technological edge as data costs come down and before Starlink takes over. But we've got a gap while the phone companies still thrash their existing business model. And just a couple of other brief points. Language has been crucial to Data Light. English in South Africa dominates the media, but a lot of other languages massively underserved. Biggest is Zulu, by far the biggest. We've been bilingual from the start, and that's been the lifeblood of Data Light. And no, we can't use AI to do it. It's not good enough yet. And Zulus are kind of a bit like the French. They're very protective, very prickly about their language. And so any kind of clumsy AI translation would lose that trust that we've built.
Well, hi everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm Jimena Villagrán. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Maldita.es. We are now a foundation that fights disinformation in Spanish, but not everything started in there. We were just a fact-checking organization in Spain, and that's what defined what we are doing right now. We realized since the beginning of Maldita that we were not putting attention to what people was sharing. This information is viral because of people, not because of journalism or whatever. And we had a huge gap. Basically, people was sharing things in private networks. So that private networks, we as journalists, we don't have eyes in there. So we developed this idea of having having a tip line. It was a manual tip line on WhatsApp in which we answer manually each one of the questions that people had in there. During COVID, that line died. Basically, we weren't able even to open the phone. That was a massive amount of messages. So we developed a technology that it's a WhatsApp chatbot for fact-checking that basically WhatsApp considers is one of the best tools for fact-checking in the market. And now the foundation also owns a company that is called Botalight, in which we develop chatbots for communicate to your audience and create audience engagement. And right now we have more than 18 clients that goes from documented to other fact-checking organizations, even in India. For example, there are people in India, for me it's like crazy. They have 9 languages in one chatbot, and we hear people. So this is like a crowdsourced database in which we basically learn the questions that people have. We know that this information they are sharing inside the social media. If they're on, send them something that it's fake, they send to us. We take that, we make an article, we answer them. We try to answer all the time. So we create a one-to-one relation. They trust in us. And we basically have this amazing database that allow us to research on how this information moves, trends, and to give a service. Basically, we don't think as we do journalism and people should believe us because we are journalists, but it's more than building trust, create a relation, hear what they need. And together with this, we have a community programming. For example, we ask people, we believe that everyone has knowledge in them, so we ask people that they should donate their knowledge to us. So we have this huge community that they are also vectors in sharing. We always ask people to go and share what, if they like the article, if the article answered their questions, please go and share. That's basically how we do it. So people believe more in what their friends send them than if we go as Maldita and say you should believe to us. So we believe in the power of private messaging and closer relations to build that trust. And that's basically what we do.
Hello, I'm Nicolas Rios, Director of Audiences and Communities in New York in Documented. We are a nonprofit that serves immigrants and the immigration world in general in New York City, in a place that almost half of the population is immigrants, so the market is really huge. We do so via something that we call community research, which is trying to understand the needs of the populations of the different audiences that we serve via surveys and massive scale interviews. And then we do that trying to understand, it's basically info needs assessments, but towards needs. So when we understand the needs, we try to make journalism become a solution to those needs. And we serve Chinese immigrants as an audience, Latino immigrants, Black Caribbean immigrants, and then also the immigration professionals that work with all those immigrants. So by trying to understand their needs and then trying to make journalism and products a solution, we also build bridges in between those communities, because Chinese, Latino, and Caribbeans don't really talk to each other as a community, don't really see each other's problems, and more often than not, there are common trends in between those communities. And above all, the professionals that work with those immigrants, judges, academic researchers, professors, lobby to Congress, etc., don't necessarily have a foot in the communities. And we do by also doing it via messaging platforms. To the professionals, we do it via email. Chinese communities are served via WeChat, which we are the only newsroom in the United States with an organic presence on WeChat. We use WhatsApp and Maldita Tech for Latinos. And with Black Caribbeans, we use Nextdoor as a platform, which we are also the only newsroom in the United States using that platform for journalism. Yeah, that's what we do.
Thank you, everyone. So I'd love to ask all of you what you have learned from your audiences and how that might have affected or changed your work. And maybe we'll start with you, Anu, just to move it around a little.
Okay, this is me moving around. So moving from like broadcast media, then publishing, and into like content creation was quite strange in a sense, because my audience have changed quite drastically. Because when I was a journalist working for a media company, my audience were definitely the media consumers, and of course, and then like my editor, she's an audience for me personally as a media professional, and then the companies themselves. So it's different types of audiences that I was serving back then. Now I am serving only the viewers, essentially, and then I do get very direct communications with, probably most direct that anybody can say is that, because I'm creating, publishing, drafting, even editing all the contents myself in video form. I'm on YouTube, so also as well as Instagram. So I do get the direct feedback from them, and then I do get like what they like, what they don't like, what they want to have, what they don't want to have in a very fast-paced format, so that I can turn the whole thing around very easily if I wanted to. I don't do that all the time, but if I wanted to, there's the room for it. And then also from the audience, I do understood that people can be radically honest every time. And then there are people who love you would say they love you, but rarely. And people who hate you, they make sure they let you know that they hate you. So I am understanding from the audience byproduct that I'm learning how to manage the stress, shall I say, and then also just handling everything from the production process and as well as delivery, the logistics of it, and then the engagement part. So facing directly with the audience directly was very eye-opening without the system or the institutional support that is around me. So I had to learn also byproduct that to go to therapy in a sense on my own. So that direct approach has changed the way that I work, create, and talk to my audience. So I think that's mostly of a byproduct. And then I'm not fully sure if that answers your question per se, but I am getting understanding that people out there are very different than how we were when I was working for a news organization beforehand. So I'm learning how to engage with them quite differently in that sense, and then managing it, and then getting over it, and then going through burnouts and stuff, and then recovering from it.
Yeah, I think we have to recognize that you have to embody a different level of resilience, I think, than those of us that, as you said, have like an institutional backing or more of a foundation or a community of support, like within the professional context. So that's a really important point. So, Tomasz.
Yeah, so there are like many different ways how to like collect feedback. So we tried like many of them, and some of them were scalable and some of them were not scalable at all. So on the non-scalable level, we did one interesting experiment. Like 1 year, we actually moved our newsroom to 7 different cities. So we said, okay, we know that this is a problem, that we are in the capital city and it's a small country, but still big differences. So we said, okay, for 2 weeks, we are moving as many of our journalists as possible to this small town all across the country, and we will rent Airbnbs there, and we will rent an offices there, and we will have the events there, and we will like try to bring even the politicians from the capital there. And so like the most non-scalable but most like brutally direct feedback is that when I was standing in front of the theater in this city and trying to give people our newspaper, and they were shouting on me that we are the horrible liberals and we should go back to our capital city. So that's one way, but it kind of also like teaches you something about how you are viewed outside of the normally imagined audience. And on the very other end of like scalable, and that's probably like both are important, but sometimes just the taking seriously the feedback you are getting from data is like very actually hard and very useful, and it kind of very often like helps us overcome our natural arrogance as journalists, because we are all arrogant as journalists, so we have kind of an idea what readers should like to read and what readers should really consume, and there are, just by taking the data seriously, for example, we have learned that there are many, even on the, not even topics, but even on the level of genres, there are some genres who readers like us to do, but we just hate to do it. Like typical example is that no one likes to do kind of, we have a genre like you ask, here is a question, and you call 5 experts, and you don't write your own article, but you just like take the expert's answer and put like 5 of them beneath each other, And this is, no journalist would tell you that this is his dream job, It's kind of like very like beneath, it would be beneath me to write this, But people are actually like constantly telling us that yes, they actually prefer this. Like if there is a serious question, they prefer us to shut up and just give the place to the experts, and not to kind of create some kind of complicated article around it and like this quote and this quote. Just choose the right experts and just give them the place, and I'm happy to pay for it, And this we almost never did this before, but now, just by so many people are actually willing to buy this kind of thing, that we just had to kind of capitulate and said, yes, this is what people want, and some of them even don't trust us at all, which is a big problem, of course, but they trust the experts, so let's give them what they want, let's give them the experts. Another example is even in the genres like they very often journalists don't like to write interviews in this kind of like Central European or European style interview, like question answer, like in the American journalism that would be like beneath you, right? Like why the hell it's not even you, like you are not writing it. But the readers are constantly telling us, no, this is what we prefer. This is how we prefer to actually consume the information. So we are doing more and more and more on them, and that's the true for the topics as well. So we started as a paper completely focused on politics. And because we thought this is the most important thing in the world, we didn't have sports, we didn't have anything else, right? And then we realized, like if you have problems in other spheres of your life, you don't care about politics at all, So people are kind of starting pushing us to the other topics, and I know how it looks in many other newsrooms. In even my previous newsrooms, I was always like, oh, there is somehow one article is very successful. And that's really strange. Like readers are strange, Like let's just, let's just ignore it because this is not the real journalism. We know what should the real journalism be. So sometimes it really takes like a certain honesty in accepting that the numbers are what they are, and the readers are actually telling you what they are trying to tell you, and just accept it. And of course, you don't lower your standards, but you kind of lower your level of arrogance of I know what people actually want, and try to actually listen to that.
It's a hard balance, right? You're both delegating the authority and the expertise across a broader range of people, but in some cases you're hearing that, no, we just want to hear from the real experts, or we don't entrust ourselves to drive the topics or the journalism.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. Nicolas, you want to tell us how it's changed your audience has changed your work?
Yeah, well, the volume is up. I agree totally with Tomasz. For us, one of the things that we learned is to be humble. Before we developed a solution 6 years ago on WhatsApp for Latinos, when there was no channels on WhatsApp, the reason why we launched it is because we first interviewed community leaders from the immigrant communities from Latin American countries in New York, and then we interviewed immigrants, and then we understood that the main consumption channel in general was WhatsApp 6 years ago. So we developed a solution. It was also a number that we manually responded. I manually responded. And then, so that was only like one way of listening, which is actually what we do very well in journalism, which is interviewing, right? But then the thing is that we have all been there. We go and look for interviews that will actually suit the narrative that we are making, that we are the article that we are creating, right? And we may just look for data interview that will give us that answer that we need to then submit the article. We do it before even creating the solution, even deciding to go on a platform. For example, then with the success of the Latino community, we then got some funding to expand that to Black Caribbeans and to Chinese immigrants. We didn't want to commit to any platform. Data said that we should have done WhatsApp or Facebook for Black Caribbeans in New York, but then when we started interviewing at a mass scale, we did a round of surveys and interviews to more than 1,000 immigrants from those communities. Basically, when we asked them, what is your community? As a Latino, I would have, if you ask me in New York, I'm Latino, right? But when we asked them, they're not, the answer was not that they're from the Caribbean, it was that they live in Brooklyn. So for them, the community is more neighborhood, is where they live, more than where they come from. And when we ask them, then where do you consume the news in your community, which remember, it's their neighborhood, they ended up giving us an answer, which is Nextdoor, that has a fame for being a racist platform for a population that is Black Caribbean mainly. So we decided to launch a product in a platform that has a fame for being racist against Black people, because it was that population that said that they're consuming community news there. So had we not listened first, we would have gone with those pre-assumptions that it's the same population that we wanted to serve, proved us wrong.
Yeah, I just want to recognize the importance of what you're doing, because I'm from an immigrant community in New York City, having immigrated as a young kid there, and knowing firsthand how siloed the information and the news is towards those very specific and narrow kind of cultural groups, and reinforcing the commonalities across immigrant groups is really, really interesting.
Correct. And from those conversations that we have, and listening via interviews or surveys, just one way of doing it. I recognize the value of what Tomas just said. Basically, you're listening to the data, you're listening to the analytics, right? And that's another way of listening. And when you combine the two, audience and community for that reason, because we combine the two. We analyze the data, all the analytics across all platforms, with the listening to people. And and it's very magic that when there is a match in between, oh, people are consuming this kind of articles and people are saying the same to us person to person or via WhatsApp, we publish an article and guess what? It does super well across the board. It gets shared. We get community people to talk to us about it, and we see the analytics, because what we are actually doing is addressing a need that exists. We're making journalism become useful. But we can only do that we cannot do that if we don't understand the needs first.
So the kind of the relatively unsurprising things we've learned is that, given the context of data light and how I've set it out to you, is that it kind of works, and that people stay on the site, much longer on data light than they do on the full site, which has video and lots of fancy stuff, just because they're not worried about spending data. But the kind of surprising thing we've learned, given that our mission is to get the news that matters to a broad audience with lighter fare, is that the stories which have really worked, the things which have really had a big numerical by far the biggest views have been the serious things. None of the fluffier things we've done have been in the kind of the top 10, and it's in a way our similar version of what Tomas is saying, that people actually it's really heartening that there's a hunger for serious serious political news among people who've got few resources. And I'm going to just give you one anecdote, which just to kind of illustrate this. But the unexpected impact of stories is that South Africa is having an election next week, and as I'm sure some of you know, there are kind of some violent themes to the country, and we 2 weeks ago, my colleague, one of my co-founders, Zukila Majova, called me and said we've got a bit of a problem, and basically one of our journalists, the night before, 4 guys had come to his house with pump-action shotguns in an unnamed province and shot the windows out looking for him. And it was basically he and Zukile kind of knew what it was, and it was a serious story, which I don't think wasn't a kind of massive thing, but it had really resonated with the political party concerned. And my colleague, who's an unflappable newsman, called up the local head of the party and said, "Listen, if you guys have a problem with our stories, just call us or kind of write a letter to the editor, but don't send these kind of thugs." The colleague's absolutely fine, and he's kind of safe and sound, and we've moved on. But it was a kind of unexpected facet of audience engagement. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Extreme audience. I think I will try to wrap up 4 ideas. One, we need to be useful. As Nico was saying, the main objective of all of this is to be useful. Then it's okay that your newsroom it's data-guided, database, but as you were saying, we need also to have a criteria on what is journalism and what is not journalism. We cannot solve all the issues, even people it's asking for them. The third one is that there is no stupid questions. People should have a place to ask without being feared about, no, this is so stupid, I should learn about this. But if people is asking to you, it's because they got into Google or they talked to a friend and they don't have an answer. So there you have a need. And last one, it's that not every content is for everyone, but you should write it as you are explaining this for everyone, like you are explaining this to a friend in a bar. So with that 4 things said, For us, it's like Clara, our CEO, always tells us the reporters in the newsroom, like, okay, think about a woman that has worked during 12 hours a day, then she gets into her house and she doesn't have time or anything to decide to read us or to go and see Netflix. Maybe she will decide to go to Netflix, but people likes to feel informed. People likes to have conversations with others. And without that information, they cannot make decisions. They cannot be part of a community. So our work is to make that simple for them. So basically, if we like think about these scenarios, our thing right now it's okay. We have a huge community that is sending us tips every day. That can be questions, that can be contents as images, videos that they don't know if they are fake or not. We should give them an answer all the time. If they think a mosquito can give them HIV, they might be able to think about it, and we need to work on that, because if not, this information keeps ruling. So the idea is you can have tech, but you need to train your newsroom to keep out all these ideas of journalism, it's the truth. And for example, we don't like to use truth as a concept. We just like to use service. We just like to use useful as words that we prepare for them. And the summary is they need to make informed decisions. And that's why we are in there. So that's what we have been learning all the time. And our community surprises us all the time. It's like questions that you have never thought about. There is one that I like a lot. It's water wet? We got that question, and it was like, okay, now we have a philosophical question in here, but it was scientific. We solve it with an article, but you can ask about anything, and that's why we are here, to serve. Water is wet, yes. Well, this is a thing. We can measure things. For example, we can measure how many users we have in our chatbots. We can measure how they interact, for example, with the menu of that WhatsApp. If we use a links aggregator as Bitly and that things on our newsletters, for example, we can measure if they click on the content we are sending them on the newsletters, but we cannot know in detail who they are. That's our main issue. It's like we only know, for example, the country they are writing us according to the area code of the phone number, but they might not be living in where their code is in there. We don't know if they are women, if they are men, what ages they have. So we cannot target our content, and we cannot solve solutions for specific groups, and we won't be able to do it because we all agree that privacy is a good thing and we should have that in our messaging apps. But for example, with the European GDPR, I think the US has more space on that. We cannot even ask them for this information. We can send surveys through WhatsApp, but we cannot ask them any information that allow us to individualize people. So I have your phone, but I cannot have your phone with your number until you agree in a huge contract that people won't read in WhatsApp. So that's the difficult part, like targeting content or knowing what is useful for what audiences. I think Nico and Documented have found really good solutions on making like a specific newsletters according to the physical events, but Nico can talk more about it.
Hello? Yeah, there. we have, I mean, imagine how WeChat, the Chinese app, is for us. Like, it's really not giving us anything. We're barely there. And we cannot even report on some things, you know, because of the censorship, etc. So we have the same issues. We're actually using Maldita Tech on WhatsApp, and we are on WeChat, and we are on Nextdoor, which works kind of a social platform, like more than a social media feed than a messaging app. And then we have products in all the normal and traditional places. As we were having the conversation before this panel, we are having a very big issue today because a lot of our best journalism and responses happen on WhatsApp and happen on WeChat and happen on different platforms that are not giving us page views. And we have become like journalists and professional adults. We have grown up in an era of page views. And it makes sense because the whole business model of our era has been ads on websites. The main issue is that the funders, we're a nonprofit, we have a lot of grants in the United States. A lot of our funders go, and the first question is, yeah, but how many page views do you have? I don't have page views on WeChat, on WeChat, on WhatsApp, but I have a lot of responses. I have a lot of people that come to my physical events. I have a lot of needs that I have identified, and I have a lot of people that I have surveyed and interviewed for my info needs assessments. So the issue that we're facing today is that we're actually using the currency of page views for a currency of engagement. And there is another currency that we're not even talking about, is that it's impact. How do you compare 1 million page views that are declining to a change in the legislation, you know? So what we're discussing is that, for example, in my audience part of my role, I manage a quarterly report of all analytics across all the platforms. But I think that's falling short, and we should be preparing a second quarterly report about engagement. And there's going to be a smaller currency, for example, 50 people that came to this event, 20 people that came to this other event, 50 people that responded to me on WeChat on that, or maybe 1,000 that sent me a message on WhatsApp. It's smaller currency, but not maybe, for sure, it's a very more engaged currency than the million page views that we don't know. And I'm pretty sure that the bounce rate is going to be super high. But the third quarterly report that we think that we should be making, hopefully standardized as a way, it would be an impact way of a way of measuring impact. That there are frameworks to measure impact, but people are just measuring if they're measuring. No one is really analyzing it, and there is no standardization of how to do that.
There is a thing that, for example, in our case, we believe that people don't have to read a full article to get the idea. That's the only way to stop disinformation. It's like if you read the title, you might have an idea and say, oh, okay, this is false, and be prevented for the next time. Or if you see this content on TikTok, the video itself should be clear. We are not taking people from TikTok to our websites, or we are not taking people from Instagram to our websites. It's really difficult. Who really goes into the bio and clicks on the link tree and then goes into your webpage? No one does that. So we cannot measure, for example, the forwarding of our messages, but we can tell the funders, okay, we have a huge community and we know this is moving around, but this moving around as the messages are a thing by itself, the videos that we send through WhatsApp are a thing by themselves, won't be reachable and won't be measured in Google Analytics because we are not taking people to our website, and we are okay with that. We don't live for ads. We live for those funders that give us money, but they also need to change how they ask things from us. So this traditional metric of time on page is not as relevant. Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think you also are talking about things like old new things, like offline events, for instance. Or I think many of us still use newsletters as a way to get in touch with our audience and interact with them, and those are kind of older tools that are still relevant and still being used in creative ways, but the point is to get closer to your audience. Okay, so one last really
So glad you asked the question. so, so let's get into it. So, influencer, at least I identify as a content creator. I do not identify myself as an influencer because influencer is a term that is given to people who have individuals who have platforms who have many followers. Shall I say more than normal amount of followers, and it identifies an individual about the effect that they have on other people. But the content creators who went into this business, shall I say, did not go into it to influence. They wanted to share, they wanted to engage with the community, they wanted to be useful, as you would say, to share what they've learned with the community, whether it be language barrier that they want to go through. Because in my case, I wanted to share financial education and even skincare content with Mongolian audience who does not have English or Russian, any other language, any other access to those types of information. So we went into it to share with the community and then be useful, as Jimena said. So that's the term. Content creator is us claiming our own roles, and we're not influencers. We're not there to market things. We're not there to push a product. So that's the old influencer content creative type of way. But nowadays, I mean, especially with the rise of TikTok and then also user generated content, people are going into it to be influencers. So there is a distinction between those who do have individuals who have a platform who are creating content rather than trying to influence others. So with this shift, the influencer market seems to be going to an end at this stage. I mean, influencing is dead now, as we are saying, as it used to be. So we do need to think about how the environment is changing, and also how the platforms and social media platforms are changing, and how we are catering towards that, and then maybe catering towards the algorithm, shall we say. So these are changing landscapes that is happening, and also how we are living and surviving in this community. Where do we think of ourselves as a content creator and then cater our business around it, or do we think about us as an influencer and cater around it? So I just wanted to make sure there's a difference between these two. Yeah.
Thank you for that. 2 social media platforms we might not know about that we should be watching?
Oh, wow. that's a shock. Well, at the moment, I'm very hesitant on TikTok at the moment, given how it's being banned in the biggest social media user of the world. And then Threads is doing great, I think, with X going down, shall I say. But still, we are all on X, Twitter, still. But Threads seems to be doing very well, especially with integration with Instagram, and then it's going open source down the line. So I would be looking into that one. And then Medium is on the rise too, surprisingly. So still very old platforms, but yeah.
Thank you. So my colleague Daniel always says the last person with an account on Twitter is going to be a journalist. Even after Elon Musk has deleted his account, the last guy is going to be a journalist. Okay, questions from the room?
Hi, I'm Seth Forward. I'm from Canada, and I'm a freelance journalist. And I was curious, how do you try to engage younger audiences? Because for myself, I always feel like the toughest, like I always want to write so that my brother, like my younger brother and sister, could read it and actually read the whole way through. But to be honest, I don't think I've ever written a story that they would actually go to the bottom. So how do you kind of navigate that, and how do you see that evolving without becoming an influencer?
I think the only, like, of course, no one has a very good answer, and we are all struggling with this. But the only thing, like, if you have the normal management of the paper or the site or some whatever, meet in the room and talk about, how do we engage younger audience, then it's already wrong. Like, it's not going to end well. Like, the only way how you can actually do that is just to hire young people, and of course that's very hard because you can't recognize them sometimes, like if they are good or not. Just to do your best in hiring and then suffer through whatever they will be doing, because you will be you will be suffering, you will think this is really horrible, but sometimes we just have to say, like, on purpose, we say we are hiring this person, we think he or she is like extremely capable, but for sure he will be doing something we will not like, but we just have to let him or her and give her some time and see what happens, and that's not a great strategy, but it's like the best strategy we have so far,
If I can add to that, young people is not a homogeneous group. Because when you say young people, there are quite a big diversity in it. So I would talking to young people and even getting attention of my own sister is like having a crush on a boy who does not really like me, right? It's so hard to actually get engaged with them. So just look at it as in a diverse way and then try to get to where they are in the present. One of the great examples that do cater towards this audience is, I'm pretty sure you are all aware, is the Daily Oz. They are on Instagram, that they just get to them. Their main platform is Instagram, and they just go through these slides. Go through news in a 10-slide format, in a sense. It's a great way of producing content and delivering it. Obviously, it is on Instagram, which is they don't own the platform itself as of that way. So just try to cater towards the different needs of young people, different interests, shall I say. Because young people itself is not an interest group. Like, what type of interest do they have? It's a very big parallel, shall I say. Like, anybody who is interested in a specific topic can range in age from like 8 to 20, or not 20, 50 or so. So it's a vertical. I would say see it as a vertical, and then try to cater towards that specific interest. Rather than going wide, go deep, go vertical would be a good strategy, I would say. Just maybe think on it that way.
I would like to jump on this. We did two things. One, we realized that young people was working in our newsroom, and we weren't using what they knew. So from one side, we hired one new community manager that TikTok is her thing, and currently TikTok is like our only growing social media right now, because she's making everyone in the newsroom doing TikTok. All the time, you just go and see on the window and they are dancing outside, and that's okay. And it's really funny. Their videos are amazing, even like for every kind of age. And we have grown a lot during the last few months. But the other thing that we did was creating a new brand. Maldita has like this brand that it should be trustful and serious, so there is no way that we could handle like the new codes and things like that. So we now have a team and a new brand that is called Factos, and it's just for Instagram and TikTok. We question a lot about we are selling all to an algorithm and the platforms and how they work. We are not seeing this as we are going to be there all the time. Maybe we can move and then we should take this brand to other place. But this is basically having a content creator in our newsroom, and she can use codes. She is like more free than just using the brand of Maldita. Even needs a brand inside Maldita and Maldita Foundation, basically. They work separately. They have other topics. They have other codes. They can be talk more freely. And during the last few months, we have been growing this account organic. We haven't even made a launch. The official launch will be like in October in an event and everything. And the other thing that we made was alliances with content creators that were worried about disinformation. So a lot of them now share our content, so we get to engage with their audiences that they are not giving that type of content. So it's like a win-win for their audiences and for the content creators and for us, obviously.
Yeah, do you want to add something? And then let's gather a few questions. So
Yeah, just very briefly to add to what's been said. I mean, I think the idea of having young people in newsrooms absolutely pivotal, but it's, you know, communicating with a young audience, you know, it's the same challenge as communicating with as broader audience as possible. And the sub-editor is the kind of, they're the unsung heroines and heroes in newsrooms, and a lot of people outside our profession don't kind of get that. And there's this great phrase which a grizzled old sub-editor in England I came across, I spoke to, he said this, the role of a sub-editor is to protect the reader from the pretensions of the writer, of the journalist. And I think the key is to get young sub-editors, and often the sub-editors are much older people, and we have, you know, the most experienced people are generally, you know, obviously older, but I think the key is to get younger people to become sub-editors.
But we have to find something else.
Alison Campbell from Internews. Nicholas, I loved what you were saying about in face-to-face and in-person events. I think for many newsrooms that would just seem like way too much work, way too labor-intensive, even though you're likely smaller than they are. So I wonder if you could talk to us about what makes a good face-to-face event. What are you looking for when you go there? Aside from the connecting with the few deeply, how does it have a life kind of beyond that event?
So I'll just finish quickly. So I think we have to abandon pages because they are really like the horrible metrics. But we have to invent, so we have abandoned it already 10 years ago, and if my reporter asks me what are the pages or article, I will say, I will not tell you. I'm not telling you because it's like the most damaging metrics. But we have to find something else to replace it with. And as we saw, like it's even harder now, it was 5 years ago, because there is views in the newsletter, and there is views on TikTok, and there is something else. So we have to, until we find something better that we can persuade people who are asking us for pages, like, no, this is like new, better metrics, then it's problem. So it's our task to come up with something that say this is better, and some newsrooms can be faster in the replacing of that, and some probably cannot yet. Yeah.
To that, I think that there is a big opportunity for us as media to maybe form a blog, Ryan. And that could be like a big thing, you know, like to work together with a standardization of engagement, you know, or a standardization of impact. You know, those are two things that are being left from page views. And I don't think that anyone has the answer. I think that we are moving away from the website world of the internet, and maybe there should be new proposals around that. Can I answer the second question? Events. I think that there are heavy lifts, but it speaks all on this second currency of engagement, right? But it's very highly engaged people that could be maybe paying for some products, or that are there because they're paying, right? As how we give events longer life, you're right, they die when people leave the room. We're doing two things. One is having hosted conversation and moderated conversations to which we also listen. And then we have people come up with some sort of like surveys or like things that they can fill, that it's data that we also analyze. It's just not multiple choice. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but it's ways of still listening to the people that are there. One way that we have come to do that are for us is a lighter lift is basically what we did at the beginning when we did all the community service is tag along with the incumbent communities, the organizations that already work, and we bring them in, and they basically bring more people to your party.
It's been such an interesting discussion, and sorry that we have to wrap up. You've taught us how to center humility, how to move the product away from just being an elite thing for elite audiences, and that it's incumbent on us as journalists to democratize access to our work. So thank you for that, and a big round of applause to you.
Thank you, Ariadne, for moderating. Really cool panel. Thank you, everyone. It sounds like this one will inspire some discussions afterwards, so find them, have lunch with them in an hour, build partnerships. We can think about how to co-create, and thank you, everyone. So we are up now with a new panel between, this is one of the quicker transitions we'll manage. So now we'll get started with a session on managing crisis. How do you innovate? How do you build resiliency in times of crisis? We'll just get the panel up here real quick, and we'll be starting in maximum 30 seconds, 1 minute. Okay, we got the panelists in here, so it looks like we are ready to go. So this session, as I mentioned, is called Pivot Under Pressure, How Media Innovate Through Crisis. Aaliyah will lay the foundation for the discussion today. But briefly, Aaliyah is the co-founder and CEO of Daraj Media. They've helped our projects at IPI quite a lot in the last year, providing insights and building partnerships. And we're really excited to have her moderate this panel. She can introduce herself in a bit more detail, but she is based in Lebanon and will take the conversation away.
You can, okay. It's really an honor to be moderating this panel and facilitating a conversation around some of the most inspiring stories from the ecosystem of independent media and our industry in general. Before I give the floor to the panelists, I'm going to briefly introduce everybody. Aaron, I know Mugisha is an Ugandan investigative journalist and social entrepreneur. He's the founder of Rise for Community and Media Empowerment and Rise Against Poverty, and is the team leader with Rise News Uganda Network, which feeds many on-air and online outlets with emphasis on in-depth, people-centered and impactful journalism. Don Kevin Hapal is head of data and innovation at Rappler Philippines. He started at Rappler as a digital communications specialist. He was introduced to data journalism while writing and researching about social media, disinformation and propaganda, and he now leads a team of data analysts for Rappler, helping the organizations and its partners craft data-driven brand and content strategies, marketing campaigns, as well as audience development playbooks. Veronika Munk is Director of Innovation and News Markets at the Slovak Denik N. Before, she worked for almost 20 years in the Hungarian media market, and she was the founding editor-in-chief of Hungarian Telex. She has written and edited thousands of articles, hosted podcasts, produced documentary films, and published a successful nonfiction film, and she has ran successful internship campaigns and programs, and Darina Chevchenko, partner and CEO of Genomics Media Consulting, and is founder and CEO of Kyiv Independent in Ukraine. Before I start asking questions, just very quickly, when I was invited to moderate this session, pivoting under pressure, the first idea that came to my mind was an even stronger word than pivoting, and it was existing under pressure. The main reason my own organization, and I think this is applicable to everybody else, the main reason we existed as independent media was really pressure from against us as journalists where we were working. I co-founded Daraj in 2017, and since then it has been one round of pressure after the other, even if the pressure is taking different forms and different shapes. In a lot of ways, one can be thankful to this kind of pressure, because somehow if we survive, it becomes the reason why we're growing, the reason why we're moving forward, becoming better at what we do. But I don't know if hoping for pressure is a good business model. And anyway, we'll talk about that a little bit. Just to let you know, I'm going to have 2 rounds of questions with the panelists, focusing mostly on the personal part in the first question, more on the institutions, the second one, and I'll leave some room for your questions towards the end. Darina, I want to start with you. Overnight, you had to shift from being a startup, celebrating really the launch of a startup media, and overnight you found yourself becoming the media or the medium covering the Ukraine war. Can you tell us about that?
Well, yeah, it was. I mean, we were founded in crisis. We were founded when the previous Voice of Ukraine and English language media outlet in Ukraine, the Kyiv Post, that was on the market for 20 years, was closed by its owner, and the whole staff was fired. The editorial staff, however, didn't want to comply, and they wanted to do something else. And, you know, there's also like the closure of the Kyiv Post left the market without an English language Voice of Ukraine. So there was no local information coming out of Ukraine, and the tensions on the border were already building up. So we were kind of understanding that there's something coming up. We got a lot of emails from local businesses who worked internationally, international businesses working in Ukraine, asking us to do something about it because it's a vacuum. It's kind of crucial for their business and their welfare. I was back then already at Genomics Media Consultancy. I worked at the Post before, so I knew the team, and I kind of asked them if they needed help on the managerial and business side, and they did. So we had to move very quickly out in that crisis because they knew that the owner of the Post wanted to launch something else, and we knew that it would be a Frankenstein kind of media that wouldn't preserve the values we were working for 20 years. So we basically launched in like a couple of days. Within a week, we already had a first newsletter out, a website, and we were on the crowdfunding campaigns. Platforms we were on Patreon and GoFundMe before we even had a website. We did a lot of communication efforts, so we started talking to all the media development organizations in the world, reaching out proactively, telling the story of our kind of the Kyiv Post closure and how we were founded, and we got a lot of media exposure, and that all, I don't mention it just to brag, that all played a vital role in how we actually became the Voice of Ukraine. Because we were founded 3 months before the full-scale invasion. We had nothing, like no money, no office. We were 18 people on the editorial staff and myself. Basically 17 people, 18 in total. And it was, I mean, it was a challenge. We knew, like, if not for the war, we would probably grow slowly or slower. But then the idea that the war made us popular is also kind of wrong, because when the invasion started, people started Googling like news from Ukraine, and they found the Kyiv Independent because we did a lot of this communication efforts. We did kind of fight for a lot of exposure. We were on the platform, so we didn't have to set up something hastily, and people just found us on GoFundMe, and it was their way, in a way, to support Ukraine, because our brand wasn't like super prominent back then. It didn't probably happen overnight, but within the next couple of weeks, we did become the Voice of Ukraine, and there was this moment when Ursula von der Leyen quoted us in the European Parliament, and then we were like, that's us, she's talking about us. And we realized that we did become what we were meant to become, probably hoping to become that over the years, but we did become that over a few months.
Back to that from an institutional point of view, but you were very young yourself. Did it feel like you knew what you were doing in the early days?
I mean, I'm not that young, frankly. Like, I have been working in media for almost 15 years now, so I'm like, I just look fine. I'm turning 35 this summer. So before that, I already ran a couple of media organizations, and I co-founded a couple of media development programs and NGOs and media. I was a manager of like a big department at a TV channel. I was an editor, kind of a producer for the investigative media outlet. So I did have experience. But that said, I always did have crisis management experience. So people would kind of hire me to like stop this from dying. And I would do that. I mean, that's a good skill I have. The problem is I had to realize quickly that the Kyiv Independent wasn't dying anymore. It wasn't going to die. The Kyiv Independent had to grow. And I had that realization only a few months into the invasion when, somewhere in May, I mean, the first few months were a blur. We kind of were in denial about what's happening, but it was kind of hard to comprehend. I started working we were very short-handed on the editorial side, so I started working as a news editor, basically. I could barely find it in myself to answer like funding emails or something like that. But then in May, I think I was on a business trip as well, and I woke up and I realized I'm doing everything wrong, that this is a different kind of management situation. They're not dying. I don't have to be that cautious about the projects, that cautious about the initiatives. That's a whole different strategy that I have to take. And then I set up check-ins with everybody on the team, and I'm like, we're changing it. Like, from today, we're doing everything differently. That was my challenge, my personal challenge. I didn't have that experience. I did have a lot of managerial experience, and being a journalist and an editor, I went through a lot of stages in journalism, but that experience of running a media outlet that is growing, that is not restricted because we already crowdfunded by that time, we already crowdfunded $1.5 million on different platforms. For a Ukrainian media outlet, that is something that rarely happens, frankly. It never happened to the Post in 20 years, and I barely know media outlets in Ukraine that it happened to, especially on that short period of time. And we had to preserve that, we had to continue that, but also grow knowing the trust we have from our audience.
I want to go back to that, but then, Don, I want to take it to you. Rappler was sued, Maria Ressa was sued, and it's also under this kind of pressure that Rappler had to pivot away from what it's known to be good at, the journalism. And this is and this kind of pressure that projects were launched, campaigns were launched, things you were new at. How much of this kind of shifting, how does that play within a newsroom? How do people inside the newsroom as people also align to this kind of change?
Well, okay, for Rappler's case, yeah, definitely a lot of us in the newsrooms were uncomfortable at first because, a lot of these pivots that we've had to do, we're shifting away from what we were used to or what we signed up for as journalists, right? Some of the things that we've had to do to survive were borderline going into the space of activism already. But we did kind of already agree as a newsroom that, in a situation where democracy is threatened, journalism itself becomes a form of activism. And I think everybody in the newsroom just had that same kind of energy, and we were looking at the same big picture, the same context for the attacks and why it was necessary for us to do the pivots that we've had to do. So for everybody's context, for example, so Rappler, as you know, we've had all those cases filed against us. We were up against a dictator who wanted to, was doing everything in his power to be able to shut us down, basically. And so it was a very unique situation. We definitely, when we decided that we were gonna keep reporting anyway about the drug war, about the disinformation, that we were gonna get into some trouble with the government. We did expect that kind of danger that we were going into, but none of us expected the degree at which the government was willing to bend the law or to go far, just to be able to 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 shut us down. So we knew also that at that point we had to we really have no choice but to go into to take to really take the response to our communities as well. So we've had to, aside from doubling down on really investigating and making sure people um um so just to be clear though, we never really had to we didn't we didn't shift away from journalism. We kept doing journalism. In fact, when we were in crisis, we kept we doubled down on the investigations, on the drug war, on the disinformation, because part of the crisis response for us was to make sure that people don't lose sight of the bigger picture. Because what the government then wanted us to believe, or wanted the people to believe, was that, this is just one organization. It's not gonna do anything with press freedom or whatsoever. This is that they were just doing their function as regulators, but that wasn't the case. So we had to really double down on the investigations and all those, just to make sure that people don't lose sight of the bigger picture. But at the same time, we wanted to make sure that we were building communities on the ground, for people who cared about institutions like Rappler. So we've had at least, I think we've organized at least 2 coalitions. It's called Hold the Line, and the other one is Facts First PH, and they all really agreed on very universal principles like human rights, defending institutions for democracy, and making sure that facts also the facts has a fighting chance also in the environment. So it did there these are things that we were not really we were not initially comfortable doing, but we've had to, because I think it just really forces you to find creative ways to to solve the problem, I think.
Aaron, in the last 6 months, you've been arrested twice and you've been physically attacked 3 times with your equipment broken. And as you said, it's still May. There's still 6 months to go in the year. Because of your work, you told me you lost a restaurant you were running, which for you as a journalist is how you make money, because journalists work. I mean, the job of a journalist is the mission, but they need to have another source of income, which is their business. And you saw your business being broken because of the work you do. Still, you decided to be creative around it, and I think your experience is very unique this way, because you're blending a lot of work that usually is done, like merging CSO work with journalism, etc. But it's also kind of your innovative way to survive as a journalist and a network of journalists. How does that help you survive in the short term, and you see the growth in the long term for you as an individual?
Thank you very much. I think what we should appreciate is the fact that journalists across the world are facing almost similar challenges. But what should also be tackled is the solution is available based on the different locations of those journalists. In fact, that's why I'm happy that I'm here to be part of this conversation from Uganda. And I thank the CAS Media for Sub-Saharan Africa for supporting me to be here. And of course, IPI and other organizations. But we have a lot of cases from Africa that never crossed the international scene. And now what you're asking is because we have put in a lot of effort for our case as Rise News Uganda network to be able to reach at a certain point. So when I joined journalism about 9 years ago, I realized that there was a gap, especially how the journalists were living. specifically for my country, journalists are underpaid. They are employed under unclear circumstances, most of them. So the labor policies, a lot of gaps. They have no contracts. So you find a journalist almost struggling to live or to survive. So what I wanted to address was ensuring that we can have a journalist who is not vulnerable. I think we should stop looking at journalists as if they are vulnerable. And that's what we are trying to deal with as Rise News Uganda Network. So what I did, I sat down with my few friends and we started Rise Against Poverty organization, RAP Uganda, in 2016. Our main objectives and goals and targets were to empower the community, but later, in 2018, we realized that we were dealing with non-journalists in the community. So we said, how do we accommodate for our comrades, the journalists? Then that's when we started Rise News Uganda Network. So we said, which activities can we participate in? We have no funders, we have no much money, we are part of the vulnerable, in quotes. Said, what do we do now? So under Rise Against Poverty organization, we started some ventures that could support Rise News Uganda to be running. And that's when I started the restaurant business, multiple snack centers in the city center. Little did I know that my perpetrators were closely monitoring. And because Rise News Uganda Network largely deals in in-depth work and the unreported issues, gender, equality, human rights, climate, corruption. So I found myself as the main target. And by the end of the day, I started fighting with perpetrators who were targeting my side life because of the work we do. And that's how I came to lose my business, because it really escalated. I have worked with different media organizations, but later I chose to cross and stand independently to start that network. So we have been trying to ensure that we can create a situation where journalists are empowered to do their job, but also we open their minds. Like Conrad Adenwa said, we all live under the same sky, but we don't all have the same horizon. So understand where you're from, and then understand the crisis at hand, the challenges that you're operating in, and then see how to separate your personal life as a journalist. You have a family, you know, but you have a duty to serve the communities through journalism. So when you've understood that, it will be able to now, you will be able to come up with the one complete setup of a journalist who is not vulnerable. And that's what we are working towards. And I am happy to report that somewhere, somehow, we have achieved.
Well,
thank you.
We're all looking forward to more good news about how journalists are surviving and hopefully becoming more empowered. Veronica, being a woman in a leadership position in a landscape that is mostly dominated by men, having to decide on strategy regarding how many investors or not you would have, how you deal with investors, how you deal with time. You've said in many interviews that in a lot of times your job required working over in the weekends, 24/7, which is something you need to do sometimes. But then at some point you have to stop and you have to decide to think about other things. In all the shifts as a person that you've seen over the last decade or so, how did you pivot under pressure?
Yeah, that's true. News media industry where I work in the last more than 20 years actually is a male-dominated industry for sure.
I believe not just in Central Europe, where I'm coming from and where I work, but all over the world. But I believe that is not the most interesting thing in me, that what is my gender. I like to believe that my other skills regarding my profession are much more interesting. For instance, so there are many challenges, of course, but I don't believe that they are related to gender. Yeah, we are a rarity, being in executive positions in the news media industry and being females, but I'd like to concentrate on other interesting facts, like how to build a large organization from scratch when we are under pressure. For instance, what's happened with me, where I still worked in Hungary, and I worked for the largest news media organization. It's a digital news organization, and there was this political pressure from pro-governmental forces. They fired the editor-in-chief, and then the whole newsroom, 100 people, decided to quit. And there was this huge need from the society that they knew that this team, our newsroom, can create fact-based quality journalism, because we have been done that for more than 20 years, and then they were protesting, like thousands of people protesting on the street, and it's quite similar, like Dorina said, that we didn't have anything. We just quit our job, 100 of us, and then we saw those thousands of people on the street protesting beside freedom of press, and that we decided, me and my colleagues, that the only mistake that we could done if we do not try to stick together and do not try to launch something new, but we didn't have an office, didn't have investors, didn't have anything. But we did. We launched a large news organization where I worked as the founding editor-in-chief for a couple of years. That's called Telex, and it's still super successful, readers revenue-based and advertisement-based outlet. And also where I work now, Děník, Slovakia. That's also how we say it, innovative through crisis panel. So both of the countries, Slovakia and Hungary, are in Central Europe, are extremely polarized. There are this huge political pressure from the government towards independent journalism. So building projects from scratch and making them sustainable, that's the real skill that needs to be done, despite the fact that you are a female or a male executive.
Actually, that takes me to the next round, and indeed, you've worked in two countries that are highly polarized, both ran by populists who consider journalists in a lot of cases enemy of the states. When the prime minister in Slovakia was shot, it was the journalists who were blamed for almost causing something like that. But you were saying how the protests happened when 100 journalists resigned in Hungary, and right now you are saying that it is an audience-supported media, that the public still believes, amid all the complexities of the ecosystems we function in, the public is still reliable to support independent, strong factual journalism and make it survive. Do you feel very confident about that?
I feel confident because I work for this company that has 72,000 subscribers in a country of 5 million people. So you can do the math of the rate. It's actually a better rate than the New York Times has in the United States. So it is working. I mean, I believe in the readers. I believe that in our industry it's possible to be sustainable from the market, because these countries that I'm affiliated with, both are extremely polarized, despite the fact that being in the EU, the freedom of press situation is not, so to say, the best. But part of the society are keen to consume facts, keen to consume quality journalism, and believe in the core of our profession, which is helping democracy, helping people for free decisions, informing people, and give them enough information for their free decisions in their lives. And they seems to be willing to pay for that service. So,
But you also worked on diversifying your revenue streams, and if I understood correctly, it's not all audience.
Yeah, so 60 to 70% of our revenue is coming from digital, not just digital, because we do have print outlet as well. So coming from subscriptions, but yeah, you are right. 20% of our revenue is coming from book publishing, which is quite interesting, and we also have some proportion of advertisement, and we get money from live events. So yeah, I believe, especially in difficult circumstances, it's super important to differentiate the financial revenue streams. Therefore, the company and the people work in it can be much more resilient. So saying it from the business point of view, yeah, we need to be like, mental health is important in terms of resilience, but we are not able to talk about independent journalism without talking about the financial independence, right? So we need to think about what kind of revenue sources can serve our super important democratic function. And this is it seems a successful methodology if you grow as many legs as possible and try to stand on them in a stable way.
If we have time, we have to talk about mental health, trying to do that. Aaron, I want to go back to you, because in your experience also, you're functioning in an ecosystem that is not friendly for journalism and for journalists or journalism. You were telling me that the new law that was passed recently, the fine for a media that is considered to be promoting homosexuality is almost $500,000. You were also telling me, I mean, I understand your model is largely focused on serving communities and inspiring communities, but again, you're working in a space that the community is not monetizable. You figured out a way somehow to use the network and have some leverage over other media players. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
As Rise News Uganda network, what we are doing is we have a network of media outlets that we serve with radios. So we supply their newsrooms with stories on a daily basis, and they pay for that. So for those that we don't give to the radios, such a kind of stories that are in-depth and sensitive, we upload them on our website. But also, because of the media space in Uganda, which is a bit limited, the largest space is occupied by advertisement and entertainment, which I think it should be dealt with. So what Rise News Uganda network does is that, as a source of revenue, those stories that are given to those outlets, they pay monthly. And that's a formal arrangement with them. But also, we also have other sources of revenue outside the network, because Rise News Uganda network is part of a company. You asked about the new law. Recently, we received communication, a warning, because we were doing more stories about how the sexual minorities are being affected, and we were warned. So we sat down and improvised on how best we can approach that problem. So under our network, we have journalists who are employed by other media houses. So what we do is that when we do a story and a media house is not willing to deliver it in its delivered, and we set a target. We say in 1 month or two we have to deliver this number of in-depth stories. Yeah, but for the daily stories, simple stories, those ones are given to the media outlets that pay for them. But as a network, our core issue is to deal with the in-depth stories and unreported issues. Yeah, yeah.
Explain that when you do a story, if you publish it yourself, it's going to be a few hundred reading it. If it goes on the radio, it's at least 2 million people listening to your same story. Drawing this relationship with the radio stations, how do you make sure that you're on the winning end in this relationship?
That's a very good question, especially due to the fact that we are talking about media innovation. I think we have been made to sort of think that a media house or a journalist cannot control his or her work. You have to control your work, own your work, and control it. You can, in fact, control the avenues where it should be delivered. And that's why I'm saying, as Rise News Uganda Network, we serve over 15 million people through online and on air. We have about 30 radios that we serve the different stories on daily basis, stories that never go to our website because they are simple stories. And for those that are sensitive, even when some radio stations are not willing to accommodate them, besides changing the approach, as I've said, we cannot labor much to explain. But before you become part of us, you already know what you're going to deal with. So it's a formal arrangement. If we say we are dealing in this kind of content, you really have little or no room to try and rock us out if it is time for us to deliver. So we are not begging them to deliver stories. No, we have an arrangement with them. And that has enabled us to be able to deliver all kinds of stories that we want, but we ensure professionalism and upholding the principal values.
This to you, Don, because we're all, I think, in the middle of a conversation of how much innovation, especially in the light of how fast AI is moving forward, how much of it, how could we make sure that, as Aaron was saying, the journalists keep owning their stories, keep being empowered by the journalism that they do. How much, in your experience in the newsroom of Rappler, how much innovation could help secure something like that? And in a follow-up, how important is that within an independent media that are usually functioning within scarce resources? How much of a priority is something like that within modern newsrooms?
Yeah. So you mean how much is
how much to invest on innovation
and how much on short-term?
And I'm going to ask Daria the same, even from a business point of view, because most of the time journalists are accused of focusing too much on the content creation and the journalism itself, but not as at the business side of the operation. So from an innovation point of view, how much can journalists come up with the tools, the strategies to empower their own ownership of the content that they create?
So okay, just to bring it back to how we were during the crisis years, and I wish I could tell you that during those years we were actively trying to innovate our way out of it. but to tell you the truth, that wasn't the case. We were in our worst years. Our heads were down. We weren't thinking. Our journalists weren't thinking, and our newsroom wasn't thinking. We weren't thinking innovation. We were thinking, how do we get the next payroll? how do we keep our journalists safe? And then we were very focused on survival. Because we were dealing with Duterte around the time when the landscape itself was also changing, right? News consumption habits are changing, and everything was just really moving. And in fact, I'd argue even without Duterte, we would have had to pivot our business regardless, right? So innovation for us, honestly, it wasn't at the time when the things that have helped us survive for Rappler wasn't really, you know, being able to think. It wasn't because we were so good at thinking ahead and thinking about what would be the next big thing is going to be. We were just one. I think I'd attribute it. I'd attribute our survival more to one, just our persistence and um, just really keeping to what we do best and still we're just doing journalism at the end of the day, doing the best we can at the situation. And two, we were really just fast to acknowledge crisis, I think. So yeah, in the question of whether or not we were not actively kind of keeping track of how much time we spend on innovating and just doing journalism. We were just doing what we were going from one problem to another. In fact, if you know Maria, when we were dealing with the crisis, she was just constantly telling us to go Kevin, go throw spaghetti on the wall. And that's what we were doing. We're just throwing a lot of spaghetti on the wall, checking what works and what doesn't, keeping constantly learning, failing fast, and then learning from them. So I don't know. I'm not very sure how kind of, because we were not actively thinking innovation. We were just really at the time thinking survival. So.
Think. But do you see the same thing for the future, like in the short term stage now? Do you still feel the same?
Well, right now I think things get better. I think for Raptor, some of the things that we've actually accidentally have found during the crisis years, like we've learned, we've now been able to diversify our revenue streams. We've been net positive since 2019 and up until now. So we've been able to, from just throwing spaghetti on the wall and constantly checking what's gonna work and what's not gonna work, we've finally gotten ourselves back on our feet and being able to look forward. So yeah, so right now we're back to innovating. We've been exploring AI. We've been looking at what we can do with existing technology. We've been looking at what the future of news look like. So finally, we're back on that track. Yeah.
Daria, I'm gonna finish with you, and it's pretty much a follow up to the question I was asking Don. Sometimes when we're thinking short term and really struggling with making sure that we have a runway for the coming month, and at the same time you have to work strategically for growth in the medium and long term, and it feels like you're driving at two different speeds. How do you set your priorities? How do you know that how do you go in parallel on those two lanes?
I'm a big believer in strategy. I think that everybody has to have a strategy, and it's better be wrong than confused in the process. We had a strategy from the very beginning. We created a kind of a roadmap for a year every year. We break it down by OKRs and we follow the plan as much as we can. But we do throw a lot of spaghetti on the wall as well. But that is a strategy for us. Like, it's a conscious decision. We understand that we can't afford to just sit around and wait for a good chance and be super cautious about launching that product or this product. We launch something, it doesn't work, we close it. We launch something else. It's if we waited for a better chance or just like, we wouldn't do anything. We didn't have a lot of time and we didn't have a lot of choice. We had to innovate to grow. That can explain why from a side, especially to many probably local media, it seems like in Ukraine, it seems like we are just lucky to have this rich audience that is willing to pay, because we're also reader revenue based, and we 70% of our revenue is readers revenue. At the same time, we have a challenge that nobody else has. That is, we are working with the audiences that for them our content is not vital. They turn away every chance they have. And like last night, I was a bit surprised to hear that There was no attention to Palestinian-Israeli conflict, because not from where we stand, our traffic dropped 5 times, and so did our readers' revenue, so did like everything. So and we are just recovering now. Like the recovery was like super slow. For us, every time something else happens in the world forgets about Ukraine. And for us, it's money for the media, but also arms about Ukraine. All the other things happening in the world kind of postponed, like the bill supporting Ukraine in the US. That now we don't have even enough ammunition to sustain the front line. And all of that happening, and we as a media have to like, we can't just sit on the wins before. We like something happens, the traffic drops, we lose this revenue stream, so we have to engage the readers again. So we come up with the new ways all the time, trying to rethink it all the time. New products. This product don't work anymore. People don't want human stories. They're tired about of the torn limbs and dead children in Ukraine. So let's come up with a more fun way to tell that story. and there is just so much we can do to make the war fun. But we are trying. For us, it's a matter of kind of life and death. And we've been going very different ways, and we've been trying to engage a lot of outside expertise. We made a lot of, and I'm very grateful to our partners across the world. We talk, like, for example, The Guardian helped us build our membership initially, because after the first spike, it actually dropped. Because initially, people supported the Kyiv Independent as a way to support Ukraine, not the Kyiv Independent. And then they started finding other charities to support in Ukraine, and they just started churning, and we couldn't have that. So we started talking to everyone who could tell us what to do, and The Guardian, we still have that partnerships. We're talking on different levels, but they did help us initially a lot to sustain the membership growth. And then we started talking to different businesses. We have Chartbit for free still, because they wanted to help us pivot under pressure, and we do appreciate that. Based on that, we really managed to build the audience management system that is like and the data management system that is very innovative for like a 2-year-old organization. And we made, for example, we have Beyond Words, so every story has an audio version, and they helped us adapt it, and we came up with that. We did a lot of these things through partnerships, through talking to people, through asking for advice, and through throwing a lot of spaghetti on the wall, frankly.
And you opened like 15 different angles we could talk about for a very long time, but I think we all agree spaghetti is very important to our industry. I want to open the floor to questions.
I've been Maya from Serbia. I've been listening to what you're talking about, how to gain revenue. So if all the revenue stops, how long would Kyiv Independent be operational for? Closing the key for the funds?
Well, we have a pretty diversified business model. Like the majority comes from readers' revenue, but we also syndicate content. We sell advertising. It's still a small portion, but we're working on it. We also into book publishing somewhat, so we do have some other revenue streams. It's unlikely it just stops, but the Kyiv Independent will last without any money coming in for about 2.5 or 3 years. Thank you.
Hi, Esma from the Guardian Foundation. I think I've heard very clearly the kind of tension between being strategic versus being reactive. And so I guess this question is to the full panel. Reflecting back on the crises you've all been navigating through, are there any things that you would have done differently or advice that you might give to other news organizations who may encounter crises and challenges in the future?
I would like to say on the advice side and being flexible and being, when the crisis happens, you need to react. And if you start to think and create a very detailed strategy. You need to have a short-term strategy for instance, how to get money. When I mentioned that whole of our newsrooms walked out from our different newsroom, what we did, we shooted a YouTube video. That was the strategy. And I was on the YouTube video and saying something, that how we provided quality journalism in the last 20 years, please give us money. Of course, it was a much more sophisticated way, but something like that. We posted it on YouTube and Facebook, and we got 1 million euros in a month. So, and that was it. So, I mean, in this case, it was a very, very fast reaction, and then strategy came. So I think what you heard it right, then you need to be strategical, but at the same time, which is sometimes the opposite of sit down and plan everything and create a P&L and a budget and what is the problem and what is the solution. You just need to step up, you need to react, you need to do it, and then you can think for the long run or the shorter, middle term and long run.
You just create a very bad P&L real quick.
I think having a strategy was very important, given also my persona. If without a strategy, I wouldn't be able to function. But also being very flexible while having the strategy. I mean, the strategy is there to organize, but it's also it can shift when things change very quickly and unexpectedly.
That a strategy is like a route you build on the Google map. Like, say you have to go from here to there, and that's the strategy. That's the route that it shows you, like the arrow, and you have to follow it. Well, but then if you come there and there is a tree across the road, and what are you doing? Like, you're stopping to move or something? No, you're finding a different route. You're just going around it, and that's basically the balance between the strategy and being flexible.
Yeah, but also what matters and what she has to notice that no one wishes to ever experience a crisis. No one really wishes to, but a crisis is like a necessary shock in the system. So it helps you to realize that you have some gaps. When Rise News Uganda Network participated in the IPI Local Media Accelerator program, the recent one, we realized that we had key areas to deal with. So a crisis, in fact, you might not even need to wait for a crisis. Sometimes you have to sit and imagine, do you think I am lacking something? Not waiting for a crisis, but when it hits, it helps you to understand that you have some key things to realign. And then when you do that, you sort of strategize. If you have faced a crisis and you're through the crisis, like during COVID-19, as Rise News Uganda Network, we didn't close. We were still young, but we didn't close. And we realized that we had untapped potential in the freelance journalists who had lost work, and some of the employed journalists who had also lost work because of their unclear employment situations, lack of contracts, and then we had to utilize them. So we stayed with them even after COVID-19. So that was a crisis at hand, but we utilized it. We got fruits out of it. So don't look at the crisis from a negative perspective. It is also good to understand that it is a necessary shock that will help you to realize the best strategies that you can utilize to be able to progress, because you have to make money. You know, journalism is no longer about serving and then being hit and cameras are being broken. It's money. We should stop seeing vulnerable journalists. I already told you that my target in Uganda is to see happy journalists, to see rich journalists, to see journalists who can be able to afford their life, not being vulnerable. You know, I don't think that one is right. So we are working towards that, and I wish you also join us. Thank you.
work. I think that the big problem of the media industry in general, that we treat ourselves as this poor people always in need to beg for help and support and explain how important, but yes, business-wise not viable what we do is, which is not true. Journalism can make money, journalism can be profitable and still independent. That is possible. And I think by just repeating that and engaging in this vicious cycle, we ourselves victimize ourselves. And like, unless I'm very much with Aaron there, like, until we see journalists able to afford a decent life and able to say, well, yeah, I'm running a profitable media, I'm working for a profitable media, still independent, we're innovating, we're doing this and that, being proud of just not the mission, but also the process, the everyday work, the conditions of work, the salary, for God's sake. I think until then, the media industry, which is unfortunately it is now, it is really behind innovation. Like, the stuff we're innovating now, it's been done in other industries like 10 years ago. And let's not kid ourselves, that's innovation in media, that's not innovation in general. So until we close that gap between the mission and the welfare of media companies, we won't be able to innovate on the same level as other industries.
And there are a lot of opportunities. Finally, we have social media, we have digital tools, we have AI. You can sit down and see how to utilize them, put together the resources.
Utilize us, because that's what's happening right now.
Sure, but innovation goes with creativity, and then you have to see how do you benefit from your innovation and creativity, and that is money and well-being.
We can go on, but Veronica, you wanted to add something.
I just wanted to translate it to some kind of call to action to your question, that everybody needs to recognize a crisis, and the other thing, that we are journalists, and everybody should use the best possible skills that we have, and that is storytelling. The best possible marketing is the content itself, and the story lying behind our successes, individual successes, and everybody needs to turn it as a business asset to be able to communicate why is it a good story, as Darina just said, and not just bragging about how difficult it is for us.
I'm sorry, but we have to close. I'm being told, please, more questions, I think, outside of this room, because we need to vacate. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you for the panelists.
Much, Aaliyah, for moderating a really interesting panel. Quick announcement, so we have an hour and a half for lunch now. All IPI members will be receiving lunch here and hosting the General Assembly in this room. All other non-IPI members should go upstairs and have lunch, and keep the two areas then divided in that sense. But after lunch, we will start at 2:30 upstairs with the Revenue Roadmap launch, and here on mental health and the self-investigation. Thank you.